Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee with our head coach, Chad Zimmerman.
Hi, everybody.
And I guess toasty, Nate Pearson. How you
Hello.
doing?
Good.
Good. Just de-vesting. Got it. So this is where we answer the cycling triathlon related questions that you've submitted at trainerroad.com/podcast. We'd appreciate if you guys continue to submit those questions. We love it. It's awesome. We'd answer them all if we could, but it's kind of tough. We're only so many people here with only so much time. But just the same, please keep submitting those. We absolutely love it. We're going to answer some more of those questions today. First thing that we should go through, tis the season. It's a holiday week, kind of, for many folks right now. We're in between the Christmas holiday and the New Year.
It's a 2-day work week for us.
It is a 2-day work
I
week.
almost felt like we should have done the whole week off, and then Monday is a 1 day, and then we get Tuesday off.
Yeah.
We could have done something magical there.
Yeah, we could have.
I know,
right?
huh?
Yeah.
Next year.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But regardless, it's the time for setting goals, benchmarks. Many folks call them resolutions. Many folks get upset when you say New Year's resolutions. I don't. I'm fine with it.
I don't really care one way or the other. I mean, call it what you want. It's the same thing.
I expected that from Chad. I like that. Yeah.
I like it as a way to look at what you've been doing and then what you can improve, rather than I'm going to do something for 1 week and then give up on it. Because that's a normally what people
That's
normally
like the
do.
association with resolution, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I
But
get you.
the point is we set a goal, right? And call it whatever you want. At that point, it's semantics as long as you hold to that goal. Like that's the main thing. So actually, we should share our resolutions that we have. Nate, do you want to? Where do you want to follow?
I'll go anywhere. I'll go after Chad.
Okay, sounds good. You want to kick it off then, Chad?
Sure. Yep. So I see, I'm looking ahead here, and I see Jonathan has process and outcome goals. So he's getting a little more specific than I am. In terms of process versus outcome, I'm probably over the last 10, maybe 15 years of my racing career, and I use that term very loosely, I'm more of a train-to-race guy, or I started as a train-to-race guy, so I had specific goals and I would train accordingly. I've become more of a race when I've trained guy these days. So if I start training and I start liking it, then I train more and I end up getting fast. Then I start choosing events based on the fact that I've got fitness now. Where should I steer that fitness?
Surf when the waves are good.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I'm very, very fair weather in a lot of respects.
Yeah. Can you explain really? Sorry to interrupt, but explain process and outcome, like your perspective.
Yeah, so process really, I mean, in our terms, is training, whereas outcome is results, what you want out of it. So the process is everything you're going to do to attain whatever your goals, your outcome goals are. Whether it's achieve a particular FTP, a particular strength to weight, a particular time on a climb, a particular placing in a race, make a podium, go sub whatever in a 40K TT, that sort of thing.
And the tricky, though, sorry, go ahead, Nate.
I like to think of it as process are things you can control, outcome is you can't control.
Yeah.
I can't control what place I get in a race, but I can control how many times I work out a week.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So the process goals are absolutely under our governance, whereas the outcome goals,
And in some respects, outcome goals can, and certainly like the things that you've done affect your outcome for sure.
Yeah.
But in some cases, you can have an outcome goal. Like I have one that is very much like within my control, I feel like. But at the same time, it's an outcome that I really want to have happen. Whereas, like a race result, if that's an outcome goal, that one, a lot of that many times is out of your control. So,
can be, yeah.
But yeah, so sorry, continue, Chad.
But I do have some outcome-ish goals. One is if I do the 40K TT again, simply because I'm motivated by the fact that I didn't put out a heck of a lot of power and I put in a reasonably good time. So if I could put out good power, then I should be able to put in a pretty impressive time.
Imagine both of us at the same time.
Trying really hard not to.
Oh, yeah, we got to mention really quick. If you don't know, from the last episode, we talked about a goal that was perhaps set during inebriation, during a Christmas party, but just the same with Chad and Nate doing Masters Tandem TT Nationals. They may have canceled that, we heard. Like it don't exist anymore?
I'm pretty sure it's canceled.
Okay.
No. Drum up
I mean,
own.
your effort, canceled. But I mean, I think the race, like it doesn't exist. But plenty of people have sent in pictures of Tandem TT bikes to me, like many of them. Especially the Specialized bike. We actually saw that one.
Yeah, that one's not built for riders of our size, though.
Yeah, it's not built
Clearly
to
not.
So,
and it's carbon fiber molded. It's not changing either.
Yeah. So that one's out. But just the same, it's pretty funny. It'd be great if you guys could do that. Yeah. But you're talking solo
Anyways,
TT.
continue. You went
solo. So
you went
maybe
fast.
maybe that sub 50 is still attainable
I
at these my golden years here. Thing is, I'm kind of burnt on my bike and its lack of adjustability. I don't know if I want to fiddle with that again, so I might wait for a new release on a Specialized Shiv if that's actually in the pipe.
Yeah, I wonder when they'll. I mean, one's got to think that they got to come out with it soon.
They have to, right?
They have
You'd
to.
think.
Yeah. They're due.
I asked, I'll say this,
the R&D.
I asked the Specialized guys. They didn't give anything away, but I said I want a Shiv that's disc brakes, UCI legal, highly adjustable. So I think that's everything I said. And he goes, that's what everybody wants. And he just looked at me. I was like, that's what everyone requests. I was like, okay. Hope you're building it behind that screen, but we can't go back.
You ride the Trinity Advanced.
I
think
that's what it is?
And it is very limited on adjustment compared to other bikes.
It is,
especially for your
The adjustments
position.
are hard to make too. So and I still haven't figured out the bar extensions, and there are little challenges. One's I can deal with. That's
you know
fine.
what? You should ride my P5. I bet we can make that fit you.
Oh, okay.
Until a new bike comes out.
That would work too.
Yeah.
But this is all going to depend on how much fitness I can drum up over the next couple of months, and if I can find the motivation to stick with that training for another couple of months. We'll see.
Yeah.
Any motivation you get will be just extinguished after 24 hours in Old Pueblo.
I don't
after a 24-hour race, you're like...
I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to be doing a heck of a lot of bike riding at that thing.
I think Chad's gonna do round 1, and then after that he's gonna enjoy his time. Yeah, sit back and relax.
I still have the same strength goals that I laid out in a forum post a while back, which is 1.5 body weight bench, 2 times squat, 2.5 times deadlift, although I did the numbers on that, and it's an astronomically high number. So I don't know about that. 100 alternating pistols, side to side. I've done 50. Maybe I can do 100. 25 chin-ups or pull-ups. Hit the 20 marks. Now I'm on to the 25 mark. And just to be able to snatch 135 pounds routinely, just to make that look as easy as it ought to be for someone who practices that sort of thing. In terms of running, it'd be nice if I could get comfortable at a sub-7 pace. Like I could do a marathon and expect sub-7 minute miles. That's a big goal.
You don't understand. That's like...
No, I do understand. I've done 10Ks and half marathons at that pace. I want to see if I can extend that to full marathons. And then
it's a big year for Chad.
These are all
moonshot. I'll say it. I'm probably going to pick one of them and fail, and then maybe get back in the pool. Something's going to have to inspire that. I don't know that I'll just do it as a form of exercise.
You know what this sounds like? This is a Kona qualifying plan.
I know. I knew that once I got it down on paper, I was like, this looks like I want to do a triathlon.
One of the
Chad's
rules
a closet triathlete here.
One of the rules of thumbs of like, if you want to be a Kona qualifier, is you need to be able to run comfortably at a sub-7 pace, or like at a 7-minute mile pace. That's like your all-day pace. You can do a marathon at a sub-7 or at a 7-minute pace. That's Boston qualifying. That's extremely fast. If you can do a sub-50K or 50-minute TT, that is way past triathlete level.
At that point, there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
Well, there are plenty of reasons.
I mean, you could have a
really
15
hard,
minutes.
but
Your swim could be 15 minutes slower than everyone. But if you could do those two things, you could easily qualify.
What if we were
especially in your age group?
That would be a big change at Kona.
Still a competitive age group.
If we were supporting Chad at Kona, I never envisioned that.
I'm going to sign him up for a couple.
Just sign him up.
You won't even know.
You want to waste your money? Go ahead.
Nate, what about you?
Okay.
Any triathlon stuff for you?
No.
Okay.
So the thing, you guys are going to laugh at this, but the thing that I want to try more to do more this year is eat more. Like
he's not eating enough.
It's okay.
Because
to what end? Do tell.
Oh my gosh.
To be able to train more. And when I say eat more, I mean eat fruits, vegetables, whole grains. Because what I realized too, I get into this mode. Everyone else does that too. You start pouring your cereal or doing something. You're like, oh, I want to lose a couple pounds, and you just barely undernourish yourself. Yeah. And then workouts are harder. I looked back at this time last year, and I could do a 2-hour workout, a 90-minute aerobic, and then an hour hard workout right in a row. And I was
like 3 days in a row.
3 days in a row.
Not like
Okay.
Got it.
Yes. And that was not. It was hard, but I could do it. And I remember last year I was just eating so much food, and even on the bike too. Sometimes on those aerobic days, like that middle day of aerobic between 2 hard days, I'll say like, I don't really need fuel, but I got to think about the next day. And I think, so that's what I want to do is just.
You've turned yourself into a very glycolytic athlete too, so you kind of have to stay on top of it or the wheels are going to come off that way.
Yeah. I can just handle more volume. So I want to eat a ton of food and then be able to train more outside of that. The other two things is this year I just want to have it be, I think, crit focused. I said I had a goal of getting to, Cat 3 or something. I think I already actually have the points to get out of Cat 5 and then try to do a few races. It's just
get some results.
It's a pain to go over the hill all the time.
It is, yeah.
But I looked up the schedule and there's a lot of races, and then also just do shorter stuff. So I'm not going to do Leadville. I've decided. Because I'll go with you, but
you're gonna go. Nice,
but
I'm excited to have Nate as a Swanee. I feel like he'll be a good Swanee.
Oh, yeah,
he's a good Swanee anyway. And then he has prior knowledge after going through and I like that you had I like that you had a detonation on the course last year, because now there's a friction point, and that friction point you can help steer me around that one. So
well, there's lots of detonation points on that course.
Very true. But yeah, I mean, it'd be terrible if you just breezed right through it and you're like, no, you'll be good. Just do
it's
your
easy.
Thing. Yeah, exactly. yeah. I kind of like that. I think it'll help me. So
that's it for me.
Okay, cool. First process goal for me, every scheduled day, meaning every day that I've scheduled to train, I want to do something over nothing rather than just letting something go by. If it's 30 minutes of easy, I want to do that. It's like I have trouble prioritizing the workouts amongst work, amongst family, amongst everything else, and I oftentimes let them just slip down, and then I end up doing nothing that day. But I at least want to do something.
I've done something,
day.
Yeah.
Because at the very least, I want to build that habit, because I think there's a lot of benefit in just having that habit in place. There's certainly a lot of physical benefit too, but the habit is
consistency.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And honestly,
it's everybody.
When people ask which is the best training plan, what have you noticed? They're kind of asking for inside baseball stuff. Which training plan do you guys see makes everybody faster? And I'm like, the one they follow consistently. Consistency is the key. That's the most That's the most, I guess, consistent thing that I see across the board with people that actually are getting faster. It's that they're consistent with their training. It's not that they're doing something crazy and unique. It's just, that's it. So the other process goal, I have 3 of them, is treat PT with equal importance to training, because it is training. But I've learned that I need to do that. I can't just think, oh yeah, no, smooth sailing, fine, just go ahead.
As your knee being okay?
Yeah, it's great.
And Jonathan's had knee issues for 2 years before this?
Yeah, and you can go to 4 years. A long time. You can go to the forum, forum.trainerroad.com, and you can check out a post that I put up there on how I got around my knee issues, or I should say how I'm effectively managing my knee issues.
And do you have a particular routine you do? Is this what you're referring to?
I do, yeah, and it's up there on the forum. People can check it out. Photos and everything, a whole walkthrough on everything that I do, plus all the things that I thought were the problem that weren't the problem. You can see the whole thing. It's a very long post, but I feel like hopefully it can come up in people's search results and they say, why does my knee hurt? And because that's a common thing, and I know how terrible that feels and you can't fix it. Then the other process goal is to eat every hour on the bike. So that's, I feel like for Leadville especially, even though that's not, I'll get to why this is important, that's not my A race, but for Leadville especially, I feel like fueling it's the majority of the race in many respects. So, and I need to be better at that. I always get into the point where I feel fine, and then I just carry on and I don't end up taking it in. Outcome goal, top 5 at nationals. That's going to be a really hard one. I've gotten top 4. I've gotten 4th at nationals before.
I like saying top 4.
Top 4, yeah. Top 27. I got 4th at nationals before. However, I was very fit. This year, I'd like to be able to return to that level with the intent of building into another series. Waking up, isn't she? With the intent of working the next year into hopefully getting to a chance at win.
Question on that. Are you going to do qualifiers to get a better seed position?
Yeah, I am. First one is first one's in March. Then I do 2 in March, 1 in April, 2 in April, 2 in May, and then 1 or 2 in June.
Oh, so you're getting after it.
Oh,
so 8 potential races.
I have to. Yeah. And then there's Epic Rides races. I'm doing 2 Epic Rides races as well.
How do you get put forward for a call-up for a starting spot?
Yeah, so it's all based on points. If you remember USAC's, what was it? They had a ranking system where if a race predictor, I think it was called. It's similar to that, in the sense that the race predictor points that you would have, or your position on the race predictor would also, that's analogous, I believe, to your seed position. I could be wrong. If there's somebody listening from USAC, please let us know. But I believe that that's how it works. So basically, you don't want to just seek out the smallest field that you know you can win, because that isn't going to give you a whole lot of points.
You have to beat other good, highly ranked people.
Yep. If you beat a highly ranked rider, that is going to give you more points. So that's the goal. So I'll be going to LA twice, I believe, and then I'll be going.
Are you doing the park? What's it called down there?
Benelli Park.
Oh, cool.
Yep, I'll be doing that one. That's where they'll be having, because LA is going to have the Olympics. That's the Olympic venue that they'll have for cross country.
Is one of the qualifiers at the Nationals location?
No, and I'm not going to race the Nationals location until then. It's out in Colorado. it's going to be tough. So, but just the same. So that's my goal, is to get top 5. It's a stretch goal in my mind. That's going to be really hard to do, but that's the goal. So,
yeah.
But yeah, anyways.
Right, Chad?
It's a good goal.
Yeah.
It's within reach, I think.
Yeah. And that's the point of these goals, is that, you can set goals that you can achieve, and that's fine. That's good. And I think I can achieve this one, but it's also something that I know is going to be hard for me to achieve. And that's what I want. Yeah. So, the final outcome goal that I have, so there's 2 of them. Top 5 at nationals is first. Second one is enjoy riding my bike after Leadville. So,
the hardest goal of all.
Yeah. And so
Leadville's
like, yeah, that's a moonshot. Yeah. Chad seems easy now. But the enjoy riding after Leadville, the reason that I have that down there is because Leadville is like, I have an opportunity to do it this year, so I want to take advantage of it. But it's not like, it's not an A race. And so it's really hard many times to get motivated to do something that's that big of an ordeal after an A race. But I want to get it done. I want to knock this off the list, but then I also want to have a good day, because I want to say that, I gave it a good effort and everything went well, partially because then I don't have to go back. But then number 2, because then I'll enjoy riding my bike more, right?
No, you'll be fine. So for you, it'll probably be around 8 hours, and that is you do rides that are 8 hours. Like, it's not a big deal for you, I think, to do it. Right. So
yeah. So that's my setup. I think and it's funny though, if you look at the outcome goals, the main way to get there is the process, right? It's every scheduled day, do something over nothing, treat PT with equal importance to training, and eat every hour on the bike. I know that sounds silly, but if I do those things, I feel like it's going to prepare me for that.
The other thing I put down that I forgot was to figure out my health stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So
yours is the illness side of things, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. To make sure that doesn't happen. I have an appointment at the Mayo Clinic on the end of February, last week of February.
Oh, cool.
So let's go see a bunch of people there and see if they can help me. Let's put these at the front of our dock so we always see them every day.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, we'll pin them in the
top. And be like, Chad, how's that sub-7 pace? And
it's good for 50. A mile.
Okay. Oh, that's a funny one. That's a good idea. Chad, we had some rapid fire questions for you from folks.
Okay.
They were small ones that I reckon have mostly short answers, so I figured we'd just kind of lump them in and do them quickly like this.
Sounds good.
Okay, number 1. When we are in a workout and those helpful blurbs of text are cheering us on and guiding our workout, whose voice should we imagine them to be? It kind of seems like they might be Jonathan. Any insight would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys.
You can imagine any voice you want to, but it's all written by me. So Alex and Jonathan contributed for a short while, but we kind of decided it wasn't really maintaining the same voice, and we wanted a greater level of cohesion there. Mm-hmm. So I do all of them, which is why, sometimes they come in, I get a few done at once, and then I get distracted with something else, and it's not quick to do. You take a 90-minute workout with a line of text, maybe 5-6 lines of text per minute times 90 minutes. There's a potential for a whole lot of writing. So it's a fair amount of work, but I do enjoy doing it. It's just really time consuming. So if there are other things I need to get done, it's hard to get a lot of that done. But I do enjoy doing it, and I do base all that on what I actually experienced teaching live classes. So with people, these are a lot of the things I would notice and say to people and help them correct. And so I know this stuff is going on. Mm-hmm. It's not like I'm a literal fly on the wall, but I kind of was during these classes. So I gleaned a lot of information, a lot of coaching tips from being in them, writing them along with a handful of other folks.
I imagine Morgan Freeman.
Do it. I mean,
We iterate on these things too. We're constantly if you're doing the workout and you see something you want to change, or you feel like, this would be helpful, we add that in.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for typos, and they get caught
that too
fairly often. And then I go back in and I realize sometimes the science changes too, or the science doesn't change, but our learnings do. So I have to go back in and correct things like, no, that's just wrong.
Yeah, we've learned.
But I don't think there's much of that out there, if any, left.
Next one, Chad, I need to know, what has been your go-to libation during the holidays? Still sticking to beer, or do you bust out the bubbly?
I always stick to beer. I am actually a big fan of bubbles.
No, you don't. Oh, you always stick. Yeah, it's one of them.
Yeah.
You don't stick. Yeah.
No, beer is always there.
Not stick. It's always there.
It never gets supplanted by anything else. It's always there.
Yeah.
And then I do like bubbles, whether it's French or what's cava and Prosecco, Italian.
You're asking the wrong guys.
Looking at the wrong
Spanish.
guy over
I do
here.
like bubbles quite a lot.
Yeah.
But
bubbles
this holiday has actually been about mezcal, because for the last couple of years, my girlfriend gets me an advent calendar. Last year it was Scotch. This year it was Mezcal. So I did a whole lot of learning about Mezcal. And they're just little drams. I mean, it's just like a little drop of it.
Is that in the morning?
Times 24.
Every day. That's what my kids do.
Roll out of bed.
First thing, advent calendars first thing in the morning, right? Can't do it in the evening.
Nah, I save that for the evening.
If you guys are familiar with the TV show Parks and Rec, there's a character named Ron Swanson, and he has a food pyramid, and it's just like different types of meat. I feel like Chad's food pyramid is just like different types of
It includes alcohol.
Beer.
No, it's on there. It's one of the major groups.
Next one. Is Chad planning to use his hardtail at 24 hours of the Old Pueblo? I have a Cannondale FSI hardtail and a Pivot 429 SL, and I can't decide which to use.
Good question.
It is a good question. Personally, I'm planning to use my new SB 100 because it's going to be my go-to bike for pretty much every race.
Yeah.
I would like to trim things down to the point where I only ride one bike, have one bike to maintain.
Yeah.
So when we go to like North Star or places where they have big opportunities for downhill, Nate and I are just going to rent bikes.
Yeah, rent a downhill bike.
So before Chad had an SB 4.5, which is like a trail bike, and then a
Ride
hardtail.
bike.
The
So
Canyon,
now-
the Exceed or something like that is your name. I can't remember. Yeah.
And now he has moved to the bike in the middle, which is the SB 100, which is their cross-country bike,
Yetis,
which is probably, I think, for most cases, it's the 95% bike for
and
your type of riding.
Exactly, and for the amount of riding I do. So I don't need several bikes to ride 10 times a year.
That's a good question, though. I haven't ridden, obviously, 24 hours in El Pueblo, but looking at the, I'm watching YouTube videos, and it looks almost like a gravel race.
Really smooth.
Really smooth, right? That is a race where I think hardtail might be okay. But we talked about it before, though. 24 hours is different.
Yes, exactly.
But Chad may not ride 24 hours. He might ride an hour.
Either way, that's the bike I'm riding, so I'm not going to
It'll be a
waver
good
on
bike.
that. Yeah.
It's I feel like with with Leadville too. I mean, even Howard Grotz. So he won Leadville last year, and he chose to ride the full suspension Epic over the hardtail Epic. And I think that there's something to be said for long events, which a 24-hour race is a long event, and the strain that gets put on you, like the micro dosing of strain that you get from just bumps, and having full suspension. I feel like at this point now, I don't. In fact, if anything, a full suspension bike. I really want someone to do better science on this, where they actually measure somehow. We can figure out wattage going up a climb and then see if truly the deflection of energy from forward momentum into upward momentum that you have on the hardtail, whereas the preservation of that energy into forward momentum that you get with a full suspension bike actually is faster. Because in my findings, at least what I have, and it's purely anecdotal and not controlled in any way, is that it is faster to have a bike that can suck up bumps while I'm pedaling, because every climb is imperfect on a mountain bike instead of, I mean, not every, some of them are very smooth, instead of one that's just fully rigid. You can keep the power down better and keep more momentum.
So for this user, I'm not sure what the Pivot 429 SL, how much travel does that have?
I believe that's just a 100 mil bike.
Yeah.
I've ridden it before. I can't remember if it had a 120 front when I rode it, but it's a great bike. And it has a DW link. That's a type of full suspension design in the back. And it has good anti-squat properties, which means that it sits pretty high in its travel, but it also is very initially plush. It's not like an Epic or the Cannondale Scalpel, where it's a single pivot bike, where it's initially harsh and kind of stiff and supportive. You get that kind of hardtail feel, but then you get more deflection off of bumps. This one is a bit more plush. It's similar to the SB 100.
That's what I was just going to say. It sounds like a Pivot's equivalent to an SB 100.
Yep. Yeah.
So do you think that this person should ride the Pivot 429 SL?
I do.
Yeah.
The FSI is a really compliant hardtail, and it's very light, the Cannondale, but yeah, I would say.
I think if you know you're going to be on the bike routinely or repeatedly, that's the way to go. If you're going to do 1 or 2 laps, you can probably get through it on a hardtail without a whole lot of discomfort. But if you're getting out there for a 3rd, 4th, maybe 5th lap.
Yeah.
This goes to what we talked about before last episode with weightlifting, but we're going to be finding fatigue. Fatigue in the body is going to be a major issue and slow us down, especially with mountain biking. So with that, go with the Pivot 429 SL.
Yep, I think it's a smart choice.
Yeah,
for sure. Next one. On average, how many workouts does Chad create every week? I'm a new TrainerRoad subscriber, and I'm impressed with how many workouts are in the catalog.
Yeah, that catalog has just grown over time. There's never been a number that I shoot for. Some weeks I create none. Some weeks I create a whole training plan's worth. So it all depends on what the demand is, what I'm working on at the time. At this point, it's basically leveled off. So really the only thing I create now is if I get an idea for a new strain of VO2 max workout, I might create 3 or 4 and plunk them in there. And they're not part of any plan, so you may not even recognize them or see them unless you just happen to come across them. But now that we're showing workout variations,
okay,
we show.
I thought you were going to say a new feature.
No, I'm not. But there is something else in the works that will influence if I add a few more. But
Totally.
it's not going to be some I mean, we're pushing I think a couple thousand workouts. It's not, you can only.
You don't need 10,000 workouts.
You can only invent the wheel so many times over.
You need the right workout.
And that's what we're building. So
yeah. So it's never been an
Nate's
idea to grow the catalog.
Nate's watching his
Next
child
question.
teeter on the edge of a cliff right now. That's the nerd level that he has.
I should have just started to say the word.
All right.
Tease it.
One of your customer
Nate
support
panic?
employees was kind enough to send me the link to Chad's favorite books. But I'm wondering if there are any other books Chad has been liking recently. And you can find that on blog.trainerroad.com.
Yeah.
We'll update it with this.
Yeah, and we can slap this list in there as well.
Cool.
I don't ever. It's rare that I start a book, finish a book. Rather, I start a book, read it for a little while, shift to another book, and then I'll return to that book eventually. So it's kind of like an hour here, an hour there. So I'm usually reading like 8 to 10 books at once, which sounds impressive, but it's totally not because I'm reading it at the rate that you read one. So it's anyway. So these are the ones I'm liking right now. I'm just gonna rapid fire 10 books. The Tour According to G by Grant Thomas. I'm loving it. What Doesn't Kill Us by Scott Carney. I mentioned that earlier. Matt Fitzgerald co-authored with David Warren 80-20 Triathlon, so I'm picking through that. Maximum Overload for Cyclists is an interesting take on strength training as it pairs up with endurance training, so concurrent training, and that's Jacques Devore and Roy Wallach. Ready to Run by Kelly Starrett. I'm just a fan of Kelly Starrett, so pretty much anything he puts out, at some point I get to it and typically benefit from it.
That's cool to meet him, by the way.
And we randomly encountered him at the Specialized headquarters, so that was pretty cool too.
I had a
got to meet
fanboy moment.
Exactly. Got the fanboy out for a minute there.
Yep.
Intervention, Can You Go, Now What, Fat Loss Happens on Monday. These are all written by Dan John, and if you've never written or read one of Dan John's books, he is an interesting guy. Just pick any one of those. The Hungry Brain by Stéphane Goyennet, perhaps. That's a hefty read, but I'm getting through that as well. Science of Sports Training by Thomas Kurtz. Pretty heavy, getting through that. And then The Science of Running by Steve Magnus. If you're a runner and you haven't read that book, I absolutely recommend picking that up. It's super good. And then I'm waiting on Training and Racing with the Power Meter 3rd edition. I'm going to pick through that and see if there's any new information to be gleaned.
Cool.
And that's, of course, Hunter Allen and
Andrew Coggin.
Andrew Coggin. Hunter Allen? No. Hunter
Yeah, Hunter Allen.
Yeah,
Hunter Allen. Wow, that sounded weird for a second. Okay, yep. And Andrew Coggin.
So I'll update on blog.trainerroad.com. There's a post where we have Chad's books. We'll update that one with that stuff so you can see it there. If you have books that you're finding useful and everything else, let us know. You can just go into forum.trainerroad.com. You can find this episode 191. You can go through there, and you can, if you just search episode 191, you'll find it, and you can toss in the books that you're enjoying reading too. Zach's question. Let's go into that one. I mostly just wanted to thank you guys. I'm a triathlete and I have dwarfism. TrainerRoad and the podcast have not only made me faster than a good portion of, and he says in quotes, regular-sized people, but it's helped me achieve things in triathlon that myself and most family members and friends never believed I could achieve. The last FTP test I took early October before Ironman 70.3 Indian Wells, I tested at 243 watts for my FTP, and at the time, I weighed 124 pounds. Wow. That's pretty darn good. That's fast. With some major mechanical problems, losing about 20 to 25 minutes on the bike, I still PR'd by 20 minutes.
Good job.
I jokingly refer to myself as the fastest dwarf on Earth, and you guys are truly making that happen. Oh, and do you have any good sources for in-race quick fix tips? Tire changing, bolt tightening, forgive me, shifting chain issues, bolt tightening.
Zach, ouch.
Shifting chain issues, etc. I put down some tips here, some ones that I feel like are things that, whether it's a process or a thing I carry with me that help with that. I'm sure we can add in on different things that we've done thereafter.
All the things that have happened.
Yeah,
we've covered the bases.
Yeah, unfortunately. First of all, for tires, for flats, I should say, go tubeless if you can. Carry pre-threaded tire plugs and a boot patch. And what I mean by pre-threaded tire plugs, you can use something like a Dynaplug, and then you can already put the little plug, or the side of bacon as some people call them. You can put that in there so then it's ready to go. It's a pain. You know how adrenaline filled you are and everything else, and when you get a flat and you're frustrated, last thing you want to do is carefully thread the needle, in something that doesn't really want to fit.
And I don't really ever see these for road people, but mountain bikers do it, but I've never seen a roadie with them. Maybe they're hidden somewhere.
Yeah.
But they're the same concept. You should still have it.
Yeah, Genuine Innovations makes things that look like a big thumbtack, kind of.
Yeah, a little screwdriver.
Those are cool,
little
too.
screwdriver.
Really cool.
Yeah, the screwdriver. And they and you can thread it through right there. And then Keegan Swenson was actually the one that originally gave us this tip. And you use it and I use it, and I'm sure Chad does too. But we basically use a small thing of electrical tape and we just tape those to our handlebars or our stem in a spot where you can quickly grab them, plug, and then keep riding.
For mountain biking. And for road, I would keep it in my saddlebag or right behind the seat.
Yeah, for sure. And then I'd always carry a boot patch as well. And what that is, you can actually buy boot patches. You can use a wrapper for sure, or a dollar bill or whatever else. But you can buy a boot patch. If you look up, I think Genuine Innovations may make them, but if you just ask your bike shop or you look on any bike website, you can look up tire boot patch, and a lot of the time they'll have, it's like basically thick rubber, and it's got adhesive on one side.
So what is a boot patch for?
So let's say that you get a hole that's bigger, that is not sealant, can't seal. In that case, you would want to plug it, right, with a tire plug. But sometimes a tire plug isn't even enough. This is common in like a sidewall tear. So if you rode up against the side of a rock on a mountain bike, or you hit glass on your road bike and it kind of slashed it in a big way, in that respect, you actually want to patch the tire from the inside. So you have to clean the tire off, make sure that there's no sealant or anything else on there. So you just rub it with your hand, your glove, some type of cloth, and then stick that on there.
And with that, then do you put a tube in, or?
You could, or if you have sealant with you and it hasn't leaked out, you could put sealant in, then reinflate it if you want. But I'd recommend at that point using a tube.
It's risky because you're using up CO2s that you, like I've done that too.
And do they work well with high pressure tires, like road tires?
They can, yeah.
Well, you can use on that, what people do is they'll put in, say you have a Honey Stinger waffle wrapper, you put that in, and you put your tube in, and it's just there to keep the tube so it doesn't poke out the hole.
With the tube.
And that's basically the point of the boot. And you want the boot to be bigger, obviously, than the hole.
Yeah.
You can't anticipate the size of the hole, but you basically just get a boot. And some people actually buy, somebody will probably end up saying this, and you can post it in the forum, some people buy actually just adhesive-backed rubber, and then they'll cut out like custom shapes, basically, and kind of keep them with them.
I've also seen people use old pieces of tire to cut that out.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then also a dollar
Old
bill.
pieces of tube.
Old pieces of tube as well.
Yeah.
A dollar bill costs $1.
Yeah,
Put that in there.
the hard part about the tube is that it has
Every
the
time.
same elastic properties as, or that's probably the wrong term to use, forgive me engineers, but as the tube. So sure, another layer of it will make it so that it won't poke out the hole quite as much, but it's still having something.
Yeah, you
like
don't want the tube.
A boot isn't flexible. A Cliff Bar wrapper isn't flexible. That's why it works in that
So
case.
this happened to me in Hawaii, where the sealant wouldn't seal. And one thing that you made me aware of, and I came aware of after this, is that sometimes sealant, it will seal at a lower pressure, but as you get up higher to the 70, 80 psi, then it will break through. So you think that you've had it sealed, and you're like, ooh, I'll use the CO2 now and get it up there, but then it will just break again.
Yeah.
And that's annoying. You lose the CO2 that way.
That's kind of why road tubeless has been so hard. Like it hasn't worked as well as mountain bike tubeless, because for so long, you're running too much pressure, so it just blows that seal that's been created by the sealant. But now, like on our NVs, for example, on our wheels, I'm supposed to be running something like 50 psi or something like that, like really low psi. So as rims are getting wider, and then tires are getting broader, everything else like that, and then they're designing these tires better, then we can run less pressure. Thusly, tubeless sealant's going to be much better for us.
It does work though well for, in our area we have little things called goat heads, which is it's some I forget the plant name, but we'd get so many holes on that, and I can see after a ride there'll be little like prick points, and you can see the sealant. So for small holes like that, but if you get a gash, like it would seal on mountain biking, but it wouldn't seal on road. But any tire, if you're tube too, you're going to be
totally
stuck.
If you're not tubeless, carry, and even also if you're tubeless, carry a tire lever for sure.
Sometimes two.
Yeah, two, it can be a good idea.
If you haven't experienced how tightly your tire fits your wheel, your rim,
you should. Some are hard.
I like Pedro's tire levers
really
myself.
tough.
They're light. They don't weigh much, but they're kind of bigger plastic things.
Wider.
But they do not break.
Yeah, you guys broken one before?
I have broken.
Yeah,
I've only
it's
broken
annoying.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've only broken one Pedro's. I've broken many other tire levers. They're really good.
I don't think I've broken a Pedro's.
Yeah,
They're pretty burly.
Yeah, they're pretty strong little guys. You can get like metal core ones, but those ones are heavy, and a lot of the time the plastic will bend, the metal core exposes itself, and now you have metal up against a carbon rim. Not a good idea.
Yeah. I feel like I have those ones for at home, and then I have little light ones for riding around.
So, and I know a lot of people are yelling, you don't need a tire lever, just use your hands. And I get it.
We're not.
No.
Chad's that manly.
No, seriously, there are some tires that you can try to roll it on. I don't care how strong your hands are, how good your technique is, they're not rolling on that rim.
Yep, absolutely. And tire levers, you do have to be careful to make sure you don't pinch your tube or puncture the rim tape, which is super common with tubeless.
Yeah.
And then you just have a slow leak and you can't tell where it's coming from. If you have that situation, it's probably your tape. But the main tip with this is if you get a flat and you are having a hard time getting the tire back on, take a step back or off and put the bead, both beads, so both sides of the tire. The bead is the part the thicker part that actually makes contact with the rim. Put that into the center channel of the rim. If you do that first, it's going to be very easy to pull it off or put it on. The reason for that is because the tire is not stretched out, so it's going to be a whole lot easier to put it on.
It's the low point in the rim.
Yep, so make sure it's in the center. And if it's there, then you may not need to use a tire lever, but bring that tire lever just in case.
Good tip.
And then I always bring one really small nozzle, and it's just a pressure nozzle, meaning that like if you push down, it lets air out. I like the ones where you have to fiddle with something like threading something out and doing all that. Yes. It's just easier that way. Genuine Innovations makes one like that. Specialized makes one. They're all really easy. Plenty of companies do. And then I carry 2 CO2s. I don't like carrying one big CO2. And the reason for that is because if I use that CO2 and have a slow leak and then I need to refill it, it could constantly be slowly leaking that CO2 out of my nozzle. And I'd rather have, if I'm trying to get one big one because I need all that volume, I'd rather have 2. So then I can use up one and then still have
one. You're talking about mountain or road?
For both. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking there's 16 and there's 20 gram, right?
You can get even bigger ones than that too.
Oh.
Yeah,
so
I
would
32s or 36s or
with the 16, one 16 should be able to fill your road tire up all the way.
For sure.
From flat.
The problem is when you have a slow leak thereafter.
Yes.
Then, if you don't have another CO2, that's a bummer.
But I'm just saying, like, you don't, you can, I want to just make sure people know a 16, you should use the whole CO2. Yeah. Don't go like partway through on that.
Totally. Yep. Depending on the volume.
And it's enough. 116 is enough.
Yep. Yeah, it should be. And then one thing with the rear too that I see a lot of people do when they get mechanicals is they don't shift their bike down to the smallest cog first. And then that causes a whole host of frustrations trying to get your rear wheel off.
See, everyone says that, but I don't do that all the time, and it's easy. I'm just like, comes right off.
Then you don't know what gear you're in. Then it's also, you have a situation where you might get your chain caught on something, or you might be bending your derailleur.
It's not necessary, but it facilitates it a bit.
Makes it so easy. Make it an absolute rule if you're listening to this. And if you do that, it's going to make a stressful situation less stressful.
He's the person who yells at me when I get a flat. You didn't shift down the low gear. I'm
totally.
Like, I never do.
Because it's a stressful situation in the middle of a race. Why in the world would you put more stress on that situation? It doesn't make sense. Especially when all you have to do is just click it down and then pedal your bike.
And the small cog in the front.
No.
You don't think so?
No. In fact, if anything, that's probably the backwards from what I would do. I would keep it in the big cog.
Big little. Yeah. Just so the chain's at the most outermost position.
Yeah, you don't want the chain to be so slack that creates other issues. It can be harder to get it off.
I've always heard people do that because then you have the most chain available. So it's easier to get the wheel on
it's
and
too
off.
slack.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Big ring up front, little cog in back. That's it's a little thing that goes a long way. And then also, if you have disc brakes, do not touch your rear brake. Yeah, and be careful if you put your bike upside down, which I'm okay with putting your bike upside down. As long as you do it carefully, it's just fine. Some people really hate it. But if you do put your bike upside down and you have disc brakes, make sure you don't have some disc brakes like the top of the lever. If you put your bike upside down, it might depress that lever a bit. If you do that, then your pads are going to close, and you won't be able to get your rotor in. That's a pain.
So 2 tips on that. Take your bottles out before you flip your bike over. You guys ever done that? Where you flip
at least
it over?
Close them, yeah.
And then they go drip, 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 drip. And then the other one is if you do hit your brakes and your caliper does freeze, use your tire lever, scoot it in there, and you can pry it open.
Totally.
Just the regular end of it.
And if the tire lever doesn't fit, hopefully you have a multi-tool with a flathead. You have to be very careful, though, because with the flathead, you could actually, harm the brake pad. But, hey, it's better than having your wheel not be able to fit in the bike. Sure. So, the other thing I would say is when you get a flat, make sure you find a mark where the flat is. Whether that's just licking your finger and marking it like that, because that's a common thing. Is if it's flat, then you don't even look where it's coming from.
If you don't know what caused the flat, you're in trouble. You guys ever rebuild a flat and then the same thing, like the thorn stuck in it, makes it another flat?
And then
that's no good, right? That doesn't happen anymore with tubeless, but if you have tubes, that will happen.
You're that guy in the group ride that just keeps getting a flat. And you're like, come on,
super popular.
Really? Yeah. And then I guess this will be the last point on flats, because that's the most common one. If you have tubeless, keep rolling. If you get a puncture, but monitor if the sealant leak is subsiding. If it isn't subsiding and and everyone behind you is covered in sealant and so is your back, and it's not slowing down, then pull over and fix the situation like what we talked about earlier.
Give it a second, though.
Yeah, but give it a second, because sometimes you need to ride to get sealant to circulate around there to have a chance to seal.
I also do, if I'm going slow or something like that, I make sure that the hole is on the bottom if you're stopped. Because if the hole's on the top, there's no sealant that's going to catch in there. Yeah. So your best chance is if the hole's on the bottom, and then it will just drain and pour in there.
Well, and sometimes what it needs is put it on the bottom, then flip it up to the top, because it needs to get sealant on there. And then if it doesn't have a whole sea of sealant, so to speak, above it, then at that point, a lot of the time it can dry out and seal. But if it's just bathed in sealant itself, a lot of the time it's harder for it to dry. So
maybe spin it fast.
Spin it and then let it sit, and then try all 4 quadrants, right? Like if it seals here, just give it a shot. Don't just let it sit in one spot and hope it fixes itself. The other one that I would say is on drop chains, because that's a common one. If you have more than one chain ring up front, like you're on a road bike or anything else like that, the one thing, try shifting before you just go, oh no, my chain's off.
Yeah, a lot of times you can save it, shift it right back onto the big ring.
So
you have to be careful.
This is so careful.
Back onto the big ring. If it drops inside of the small ring and you can wind it up in your bottom bracket, that's bad.
Okay, yes.
news.
So this is such a key point, because I was actually in first place in a duathlon. Like I've never been in this in my life. And I did a 180 and it was climb up, and I switched to the little chain ring, and it got caught between the frame and the small chain ring.
As soon as you feel
and then I tried to pedal.
No pressure on the pedal. Stop.
Exactly.
Get off your bike.
So what happens is your chain can get sucked in there and caught. And it was caught in there in my carbon fiber frame. I had to take the crank off. So I was out of the race. Yeah. I couldn't, all my might trying to yank the chain out. It couldn't happen.
Which isn't good against carbon too.
I know. I took that out, and that frame was very scratched. So that is sad, and don't do that. I've had it happen in other races, and it's so scary because you want to, you just can't pedal at all. Even a half a pedal stroke is enough.
At all, no.
Yeah.
Just stop right then and there, hop off your bike, and try to wedge that chain.
And then on the outside, the key is to pedal slowly. So if it happens to you, you have to just barely pedal. I kind of like
shift that derailleur. And the tricky part is too, while you're pedaling slowly like that, is you have to shift your derailleur so that it moves it inside, but then watch your chain, because if it's binding and it's going to get caught and bend, that's very bad. So you have to be pretty dynamic and quick with that front derailleur if you're looking at it, analyzing the situation as you're pedaling slowly.
It's a pretty easy save. You do it a few times, you'll get pretty good at it fast.
It depends on how bad it is and what you were. I remember Israel, man. I don't know if you guys remember, but my chain would always drop. It dropped both sides.
DI2 issue.
And it was kind of bent, and I sent it to the bike shop. They're like, "Oh no, we can just fix it." I'm like, "Can you give me a new part?" Like, "Nah, we just bend this part back, it'll be fine." It was not fine.
It's not okay.
But so what I keep it in the big chain ring, and I just like slowly pedal, and you'll see if it's going to catch or not. What I've done when I try to go in the small cog while it's dropped on the outside is then it will get like caught. It gets caught between yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you really have to be careful with it. Another tip with this too is try shifting the rear. I know that sounds weird, but if it's dropped to the outside, try climbing back up the cassette to those lower gears.
But how will you get it up the cassette if there's no chain on the front?
It doesn't. If you keep pedaling, it's still moving in the back.
Yeah, your freewheel still turns.
It's still moving. Yeah. So if you do
You're
that,
so smart.
that can help bring it back. So that basically it changes the chain angle so that it's more likely to catch on the teeth. And
that's totally a good tip.
Yeah, it can.
Because that's normally when it drops too, is when you're in small in the back and big in the front.
Yes.
Just that extra push if your limits aren't set correctly in the front.
Yeah, or cross chaining always throws it off. So yeah, get to work on and looking down and be very dynamic with those shift paddles to try to bring it on, but pedal carefully. If you're on a 1x, get off and fix it immediately, unless you're descending. If you're descending, ride that thing out. I see a lot of people like I remember there was a guy at Single Track 6, and we had a wide open fast fire road descent, and he stopped to like fix a dropped chain. Granted, if it's getting caught in things, that's one thing. Sure. Like, you don't want it. But otherwise, it's like, man, you're just killing momentum. You could have saved some time, and some energy. So you want to do that. And another thing I've seen people do is try to reach down and fix the chain with their hand.
No.
So sketchy.
No.
I understand if you feel skilled enough to do that, sure, whatever. But as soon as you get a clutch derailleur too, then that's really not going to be a possible option because you have so much resistance.
Next to me.
Yeah.
Don't do it next to anybody.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So dangerous.
But especially me.
Yeah, exactly. Chad, we got a lot of, so first of all, you've talked about the fact that you're going to, I guess, continue with a deep dive into VO2 Max.
Yeah, I just want to wrap it up, actually. A couple subtopics I didn't get to.
Cool, yeah. Some folks have followed up on that. So get ready for the deep dive, people.
Part 2, and this will be shorter. Just give me 5 minutes. I think I can get this all nailed down.
Cool. Nate's out.
Okay, so VO2 Max Part 2. And here we're going to talk about a few things, the first of which is time at VO2 Max versus VO2 Max power. So power at VO2 Max is really duration specific. You can't just say my power at VO2 Max is this, because you can work at 102% versus 125%, obviously different powers. You may still achieve VO2 max. It'll just take you a different duration to achieve VO2 max. So there's no real single power at VO2 max. When you're doing a ramp test in a lab and you peter out, you hit that plateau, that could be defined as the power at VO2 max. But again, it depends on what the steps look like. And we kind of touched on this last week. So the protocol can influence what that power is even then.
Got it.
So one thing to understand, and it's a term you probably heard bandied about perhaps, is the VO2 slow component. And basically this says anytime you work above lactate threshold, you're recruiting different fibers, less efficient fibers, you will eventually hit VO2 max. Even if you're 1% above it or 20% above it, it's just a matter of duration. And of course, fitness. I mean, if you're just above FTP riding at 102%, your fitness could peter out before you actually achieve VO2 max.
Right. So
we don't typically talk about hitting a VO2 max riding at 102% of threshold. You have to go for quite some time. You're probably going to encounter muscular fatigue before your O2 uptake becomes the limiter. So the lower the percentage of FTP, the longer the slow component takes. So it'll eventually ratchet up, but it's going to take a while if you're only working slightly above threshold as opposed to working well above threshold.
Got it.
So VO, or oxygen uptake, relative to power. So this relationship is linear. This is just to further this point. It rises, the more power you put out, the more oxygen you have to uptake, and it's a linear relation until it's not. Once you hit this inflection point, or you go above threshold, it becomes curvilinear. So your time gets really limited, and everyone's notices. We ride above threshold, we have very little time.
Yeah, I can do this all day, then suddenly, no, never mind.
Exactly. So it gets exponential. It starts to exponential. Either way, it's curvilinear. It starts to increase really rapidly. Your O2 uptake relative to your power increase. So for these reasons, VO2 work is really subjective. I mean, it depends on conditioning. It depends on how what percentage of VO2 max you're working at, et cetera. And this is why in a lot of those interval workouts, 2 and 3 minute intervals, they're done at 120%, but we say that may not work for you. Some people may be able to ride a little above that for that duration, some people a little below it, and there are a lot of things that influence that. But the point is, and this is the main point of this part 2 deep dive, is that we're trying to accumulate time at a high oxygen uptake. So we're not just trying to hit a particular power, say I did it and I held it for this long, I'm good. We're trying to really stress the aerobic energy delivery energy system. And so we want to accumulate time. So it's not just about do 3, 6, or 9 minutes and call it a day. It's how much of that time did you actually spend at a really high uptake? Because it can take you a little while to get there. You can lose it, and then reestablishing it takes time. So for this reason, there's a whole bunch of different types of workouts that are aimed at accumulating time at VO2 max rather than a particular power. We want to elevate your oxygen uptake, and we want to hold you there. And we do that through a number of ways. One of them is, if you've noticed, some of the workouts or the warm-ups are getting reshaped. And they dump you like straight from the warm-up. You may have a 1 or 2 minute recovery valley, and then you jump right into VO2 max work. And that's because I don't want your oxygen uptake to decline too much before you hit that first set. It's already lifted. Let's keep it there, push you through the first set, try to keep it there for a lot of that first set. Then we'll let you recover, and you'll do however many more sets that workout includes. But the point is time at VO2 max. So lift that uptake rate and keep it there. So the warm-ups do that. Peak and fades are really good at that, where you go out at 120% and then it starts to decline down to 110% or maybe even lower. Uptake is way up high, and it stays high even though you're doing less and less work because of that slow component, right? Yeah. So power may be descending. You may think, well, I'm not at my proper power. This is not an effective workout. It is, because uptake is still high.
That's Mills in the sweet spot base 2 is an example of that
Agassiz,
plan.
Same thing.
Those are really hard workouts. Like those are hard intervals because you watch your power going down. You're like, it should be getting easier.
Yeah. And it never
does.
It doesn't. It's just brutally hard, but you can stay there for longer. So if we were to try to hold you at that same high power, you might start to fade, and then your uptake's declining and you're starting to fall apart. Whereas if we start to decline the power, decrease it a little bit, you can keep the uptake and survive the rest of the interval.
And the way that you built these two and the plans, there's a progression through. So as you get further through the plan, you can have more time at the higher rate.
More on that. Yep.
Cool.
Coming up. And then short intervals are the same. So you've seen the short, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, or maybe the 15 seconds on, but you only drop to 88% during the so-called recovery valleys or the floats. Again, we're trying to accumulate time at a high oxygen uptake. So we're not really letting you off the hook until the whole set's over with.
Yeah.
Big uptake the whole time.
This is like, sometimes I'll do a workout and I'm like, I spent 30 minutes at 120%.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, I could never,
Never
ever
do
do
that.
that.
You couldn't do it certainly couldn't do it 30 minutes straight. You probably couldn't do it in 5-minute chunks.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if we
need to
break it
break it
down into
down.
these little bits, but keep uptake high the whole time, even though there are little recoveries in there, but your breathing and heart rate stay ramped up, you're achieving a really strong training stimulus.
Doesn't this thought work for all interval training? I mean, that's why we
yeah,
do
yeah.
all interval training.
That's it.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
I mean, try to ride an hour at your FTP. Go do it right now. Let's see how long you last. You're not
not
going to
gonna
make an
happen.
hour, but if you break it down into 6-10-minute repeats, you'll probably get the whole hour every
Sure.
time.
Yep. Yeah.
And then this is also the reason why with VO2 max work, the bailouts are almost always back pedal breaks. Little 5, 10, 15-second back pedal breaks. Your breathing and heart rate don't come down that much, but you clear off a lot of that acidic accumulation, a lot of the things that are starting to slow you down. Then you get back in it. Everything's still revved back up, but you cleared off some of the stuff that was necessary to help you keep going, keep the power up, keep the uptake up. So that's why I favor, back pedal breaks over pretty much any other form of bailout when it comes to VO2 max work.
Sometimes with the VO2 max work, if I'm not in erg mode on my smart trainer, so like a regular dumb trainer resistance,
Yeah.
I will just pedal through one of them at the resistance level, at the normal. So let's say I'm at 120 and then I recover at 40%.
Okay.
I'll just keep pedaling at 40% rather than back pedal. That sounds
sure.
like that might be even better.
Yeah, that's fine too.
If it's enough to get me so I can finish the rest of it.
All we're trying to avoid is letting your breathing and heart rate come way back down, because then you're not really achieving time at a high level of VO2 max,
Right.
or high
that makes
percentage.
sense.
Okay, then there's also something, so we talked VO2 slow component, there's also something called VO2 kinetics. And for simpler, just put it in simpler terms, is your VO2 response. How quickly does your oxygen uptake respond to changes in effort? How quickly does it level off? And this changes with training. So you might, as soon as you start working harder, boom, heart rate and breathing come up and you level off again. Those are really fast VO2 kinetics or a VO2 response. And this improves with training. But because it improves with training, this is why the workouts start to reshape. This is why 30-30s become 30-20s and 30-10s. Because if we give a really aerobically fit athlete a 30-second recovery value after a 30-second work interval, he may return all the way to a point where he's comfortable again, breathing through his nose. But if we shave that down to 20s and then 10s, breathing's not going to come down far enough. But hopefully all the other things we want, the muscles to clear, the acidification to die down a bit, that still takes place, making the workout really effective, helping this athlete accumulate a lot of time. Up at this high oxygen uptake. So again, it's about time at VO2 max, not a particular power, but a lot of time at a really high breathing rate, high heart rate, high oxygen uptake.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That being said, though, wouldn't it be better if I did do more power? Like,
Different times of season, different objectives, different types of racing, different objectives. So you may need more 2-minute power, and you would train that. And that's another thing I'm going to get to, that whole power versus capacity thing.
Yeah.
So that's coming. One more thing I want to talk about is the benefit ceiling. So when it comes to VO2 max repeats, and this kind of goes in line with what Nate just said, just because you can do more power doesn't necessarily mean it's better. So if you can bang out 20 30-second repeats, but if you up the power a little bit and you can only get 15 of those repeats, it may seem like a stronger stimulus, but maybe it's becoming more anaerobic and it's not really achieving the aerobic adaptation that we're targeting.
Yeah.
So more power isn't always better. Again, more time at that effort level. And this is all stuff that's taken care of for you in a training plan. But if you're piecing these workouts together by yourself, these are some of the things you should probably keep in mind.
Another thing that I see get some people is they'll go just because they can finish the workout, they do, but it will be the most gut-wrenching.
And that's what I'm talking about. So maybe you can get all 40 of those 30-second repeats in at 127% instead of the prescribed 122, but then you're flat afterwards, and it takes you 2 days to recover when it would have only taken you 1 day.
It's
That
that
is the
forest in the
risk.
trees.
Yes, and that is the risk of going hard at the end of a workout. If you feel like you can do it, sure. And if you don't have consequential workouts that are coming up, sure, whatever, if you want to do that. But the point is, the plan's designed as the plan is designed.
Yeah, I've done it.
Follow it.
And do what you want. Maybe you find out that
feel good and you want to do it, right?
that going full gas for those last couple
Flex
of
for a
intervals
bit.
didn't have a negative impact on your next workouts. Maybe it did. So you just got to pay attention to how that impacted
I like to do
them.
it before recovery week.
Yeah.
But
sure.
the idea, though, it's you got to what your point is earlier in this is consistency. So if you go totally all out,
Every time.
yeah, and you like, well, I finished it, so therefore, Chad, why didn't you put this effort at 127? Because I could do it at 127.
Yeah.
A lot of these ones, they're designed like you finish it, and it was hard but manageable.
Yes.
It almost feel like you could do one more small set.
If every workout is knockdown, drag out, you're not going to get too many workouts done in a week. It's just you have to
It's
hold back a
short-lived.
bit. You have to recognize that you can only do so much if you want the next couple of workouts to be productive.
Yep. Eventually, you're going to find that point where that is no longer beneficial, or no longer possible. Forgive me.
Okay, so and then how this influences the trajectory of the VO2 max workouts from our base to build to specialty plans. So our BBS cycle, in base level through to the specific plans. So the race specialization or specialty plans, it's a contest or a balance between power versus capacity. We've talked about that before. I prefer to see it in terms of max power versus repeatability.
Got it.
So if you have a maximum power for 5 minutes of, say 300 watts, that's your power. I mean, that's what you can do for that 5 minutes, but then you're pretty much done. For a while anyway. Versus what if I trim that down to 90% of that power output? How many of those repeats can I do? So again, time at. So because you start working for 3 minutes at a time at 270 watts, when your 5 minute max power is 300 watts, you're going to get a big aerobic uptake. You're going to be huffing and puffing. Your muscles are going to be welling up. But then at the end of that 3 minutes, you recover and you can do it again and again and again. Whereas opposed to working at the 300 watts, you'd maybe have 1 or 2 of those in the can if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So again, time at, not power strictly. So in the base phase, we're looking at VO2 max familiarization. We want to get you used to working this hard, but we don't want to beat you up too badly. So we start with short efforts, 30-second efforts, and they grow to minute, and they grow to 90, and they grow to 2 minutes. So we're trying to get you used to working at VO2 max so that when we move into the build phase, we can start focusing on increasing both the power and duration. So the power may come up a bit, and we're trying to find your max sustainable 3 minute power, but we're going to make you do it 6 times, 7 times, 8 times. So we're trying to get you used to longer intervals, but at this point, they come with longer recoveries too, because we want each of those to be really high quality, high power, high uptake, high quality, lots of rest, do it again. Then we move into the specialty phase where it becomes specific, and that's when we start to focus more on repeatability. So that's when you start to see the stuff that's more race-like. Go really hard, back off just a little for a short period of time, go really hard again, do that a lot.
That's racing.
Yeah, and it is. So this is when specificity is everything. We don't focus so much on the specificity over the course of this, but rather we're preparing you to be able to be really good at the specific demands of whatever training plan or racing you plan to do.
You can see I'm looking at it right now through the training plans, but in the criterion plan, the specialty phase, it's a lot of the max amount of power you can put out for 5-6 minutes or for a little couple seconds, and then on the weekend you're doing these more like race simulations where it's the on off with really low recoveries.
Yep.
So it's a little bit of both.
So we're starting to weave it in. The build phase allows begs that blend.
The build phase has it, and then the specialty, or then the short power build also has that, but then the crit one is, I was saying this is very specific to crits.
Yes.
Like the weekends are the actual crit, and the Thursdays are the power that you need to really win crits.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we don't stop focusing on power. I mean, depending on the type of racing it is. I mean, a century plan versus a criterion plan are obviously going to be structured a lot differently. So there's still going to be a fair amount of focus on power and the specificity when you get into a specialization plan like a criterion plan or a short track mountain bike plan.
Yeah, it's interesting there. I find that when I become more fit, like specialty phase fitness, so to speak, what I really see the benefit is I really start to see, and I don't know if this is just the way that I'm built or anything else, but I really see the time increase, the time that I can spend at VO2 max.
Yeah.
That really starts to get specific for the event, but I see it increase in general. And that's when I start to feel like I'm actually fit, because I feel like I can always hit those peak numbers. You know what I mean? Like I can off the couch hit a high peak number, but don't you dare ask me to make that last for any period of time. Yeah.
I also feel that's where the separation comes in mostly mountain biking too, but mostly road, is that if you hold it for 2 minutes, but I can hold it for 2 minutes and 20 seconds, there's a huge separation there. And it's only 20 more seconds.
Right. Oh, yeah, 20 seconds.
And you could probably train that in like a couple weeks to 20 extra seconds.
Absolutely train that. I mean, you take 2 minute intervals and you make them 3 minute intervals, and then you go out on a race course and you only have to hold that for 2 minutes, 20 seconds, and you can do it repeatedly for 3 minutes, it's...
You destroy people.
Pretty
Suddenly
influential.
feels easy.
Especially when you're going against the person who just rides, not to knock outside, but who just rides hard outside.
They just ride a lot and they ride hard.
Yeah, right outside. Yeah. I find those people don't do the sustained longer efforts, especially at an even pace, and then repeat it.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
It's bummer training. I mean, it's hard to do. It hurts, and it hurts for a long time, and it's really hard to brace yourself for a 3 minute interval, especially if you're coming from a point where you've never done anything longer than 30 or 40 seconds. I mean, you work up to that. Again, the progression, the consistency, and the progression leads you to a point where I find this especially true with VO2 max work. 30-second repeats are hard. Then you grow them to minute repeats. And it's like, oh, these aren't as hard as I remember them. And then you grow them to 90 seconds. Like, these aren't as hard as I remember them. And seriously, that carries all the way up to 3 and even 4 minute intervals, obviously at a lower percentage of output.
Somebody just did Sweet Spot Base 2 Bluebell, which I think is the second workout on Tuesday.
Yeah, it's a modification of a workout I had to rename, but yeah.
But anyways, they did it, and they posted in the forum. They're like, they thought VO2 max workout should just be a drag out punch. And everyone's like, no, this one should be manageable and like wait until you get farther along. But they had just done Taylor, which is the 30-30s, and they went from minute, and it's suddenly not as just what you said.
But if you jump right into minute or 90-90s or something like that, it's unnecessarily brutal.
Or 3-3.
VO2,
Starting with 3 minute repeats is just cruel.
VO2 max has a strong brand. Like, people understand it for being like, it's well understood as being something extremely difficult, and it's hard for people to...
it doesn't have to be as hard as most people make it.
Exactly.
I think they're misunderstanding what it's actually about. It's not about big power necessarily. It's about a lot of time at a high work level.
Cool. I hope that clarified a lot of things for people. It certainly is like, it's a really good way of thinking of, we're talking about power, we're talking about duration, and then what's going on with it. And that's good stuff. Thanks, Chad.
Sure.
You always get me so excited to train when you do these
Chad's
things.
deep dives are awesome.
I'm like going to leave and just
go to VO2 max workout.
Let's go into Jamie's question. He says, I got into the DKXL next year, and I'm wondering what kind of tips you'd recommend in regards to monitoring power over that kind of distance. That's a 350-mile race.
Just don't do it.
Should we light a candle for Jamie, or should we say congrats? I don't know. It's a rough one, man. Congrats, I guess, if that was your goal. It seems like it. It's rough.
Blows my mind.
Yuri Oswald, friend of the podcast, good guy. He told me that was by far and away the hardest day of his life. And he has done some really, really, really gnarly rides.
Yeah, he won too, right?
No, he got second.
Okay, so he's one of the least amount of time on course people.
Oh, yeah.
So everyone else is going for longer.
I think he has an article, is it Peloton magazine?
Recently?
Yeah,
I believe so.
About that.
Yeah,
and it's illuminating.
How long does it take?
It's harrowing. So if you guys, I actually linked in so you can actually see the results here. The fastest person that won this one, Matt Acker from Michigan, did 25 hours and 10 minutes. So a thing that people don't realize, if you don't know this about Dirty Kanza, it is not flat. It's constantly rolling, and you actually gain a lot of elevation going through these Flint hills. So for their 200-mile race, I think it's over 10,000 feet of climbing. I know that doesn't seem like a whole lot, but that's significant, and that will definitely hurt. If anything, you'll go through a Di2 battery just shifting up and down all those little hills. Yuri did it in 25 hours and 50 minutes. But then if you start to look at it, drops off, and you see the meat of the people that did this, which, by the way, they're not average people that did this. They are very much like these are cyclists. That
crazy.
Yeah. And a lot of them are within 32 to 35, almost 36 hours. Their average.
Do they stop?
What's that?
You got to stop a lot.
Oh, yeah, you got to. So there are aid stations, and I think every 50 miles.
Do they sleep at all?
Oh, I mean, maybe they did.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I imagine some people would.
So the total average speed for the majority of folks is somewhere around 10 miles an hour. So if you think about that, that sounds crazy slow, right? But then if you add in the stops, and then you add in the fact that you're riding for that long. Yeah, and they had really bad weather this year. It's worth saying that, too. They had mud and everything else. So maybe you don't have that mud. Maybe you can go faster. But I guess your question is around pacing with that sort of thing and with power.
That's slow.
Yeah. So I threw down some points, then you can understand kind of like a relation point. And then after that, we'll talk about the actual specifics of what we do. But I ran some theoretical, I guess, scenarios through Best Bike Split. And if you were going for 6 hours on the DK 100, the 100-mile ride, not the 200-mile one, I threw in my stats. It would be, I would do it at an IF, or intensity factor of 0.63, which is 63% of my threshold would be my average, right? So that's like 170 watts for 6 hours. And I'd be around a 19 mile an hour average. If I was to double that, because the race distance doubles.
Seems pretty fast.
Yeah, it does, right? And the reason is because with this sort of scenario, like especially last year with the mud that they have, the wind, all these other things, this isn't accounting for a lot of the stuff that they have there. But basically, if you jump up to 200, that drops to 0.5 IF, but it would be probably pretty hard to hold that. When you're talking about jumping up to 350, that intensity factor is going to drop even more, but substantially so. Because if you look at the average pace of these people, it wasn't very fast. I mean, the fastest person Matt Acker, he had a 14 mile an hour average for that whole time. And right now you're probably thinking 14 miles an hour is easy. But when you do it
For
over
25 hours?
Yeah. When you do it for 25 hours in those conditions, it's got to be really rough. So the point is pacing by like setting some sort of, I think the hardest part about your pacing plan, if anything, is in the beginning going easy enough.
Yes.
It's just going to be so hard.
It's going to be brutally slow.
Yes.
I mean,
That's why I wish you had like an automatic transmission that you could set, where if you went over 150 watts, it would just dunk you down into an easier chain.
So then you're spinning at 200 RPM and you'll be like, no, I don't want to do that. So then you'll back it down.
With the climbs, how many people do you think came in with normal gearing?
Oh, totally.
And then you go on a climb and you are stuck at 250 watts.
Yep.
And 250 might feel easy to you.
Yeah.
But after 25 hours,
it's brutal.
You should do those climbs at like 150 watts.
Yeah, so I feel like this one,
slow.
The hard thing is you want to ride with other riders to reduce the amount of wattage you have to put out. But at the same time, chances are the other people, so DK350 or DKXL started separately from the rest of the riders. So you're not stuck with guys doing a 100-mile race going really fast. So you're only with people doing DKXL. But that said, I guarantee you people started out faster than when they finished.
Oh, yeah.
So the hard thing is, if you start out faster than when you finish like that, you're putting yourself into debt, so to speak. And you're going to have to, it's going to be tough. You're going to run out of energy. It's going to be really hard.
It's debt you're not going to repay.
For a second, I said 150 so slow. That's at my 190 pounds. For some
right.
people, that could actually be really fast.
That might be OTP.
For my wife, that's like super fast.
Yep.
The other thing is, although there is something huge to be said about a draft. And if you have 12 hours where you're riding with somebody else, even so for the first hour you want to be a little bit harder, you might be saving thousands of kilojoules.
That's the balance.
by the end of it. But it's hard to know where, because a lot of times you see groups at the beginning, they start hard and then they mellow out, and you suddenly gain 1-2 miles per hour for the rest of the race.
Oh, yeah.
And it's fun to be with other people.
And this applies to people doing the normal Dirty Kanza, the 200
any
mile one,
any Grand Fondo,
any longer event like this. It absolutely applies.
Even road races.
Totally. You have to weigh
It's not a common gripe that someone says, I went out a little too easy. You don't.
Yeah.
You just don't hear that very often. Sometimes someone feels a race and they feel like they left a little too much gas in the tank. So they say, I think I held back a little too much early on. But you'll hear that 1 out of 100 times.
Oh, totally. I think that with something like this too, so the pacing part, that's what I would be looking at, is just making sure you're not going hard enough. It's kind of like the Everesting attempt that I did when we were climbing. And I think that I remember we were at like 170 watts. And for me, that was, that was well below threshold. That's, roughly around 60% of threshold. But I told everybody at that point, I was like, way too much, guys. We need to back it down.
Yeah,
we're going to fall apart. Even though this feels crazy easy, and everyone was kind of like, huh. But even though this feels easy, we need to back it down.
That's a good thing, too, to say, is to be a leader in the group.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, too, the size of the group, if there are and this race probably doesn't have 30 people, but if there are 30 people in a group and they're going up a hill, that's a better group for me to be on, because there's more energy saving than a group of one person or two. But if there's 30 people and they're all doing 170 watts and I know they're not gonna be able to take it,
reason.
Yeah, people do it all the time. Hey, everybody, we got a long day. Let's back it off. We can stay together. We can all get a better time.
Totally.
Be that person.
Yeah. It'll absolutely help. Really, I think that what this comes down to more than anything, though, is a nutrition battle. When you're talking about being on the bike for that long,
eating contest.
That's exactly what it is. And you have to really have that refined. Yeah, so that's
that in your saddle contest.
Comfort.
That sounds to me, the neck and the saddle would be the worst.
Oh, it would be so rough.
Yeah. I kind of want to try if I could figure out my health things.
Yeah.
I want 24 hours solo at Old Pueblo.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
And so does
DKXL.
Just to get experience for our users.
200. The normal DK.
Yeah.
Why do the 200?
Oh,
just kidding. No. I do the 200 is a normal one, right?
Yep. Yeah. It's normal.
Yeah. Probably that one.
Yeah. It looks like a tough day. If you do that one, I'll cheer you on.
Well, I think I need support, right? Because isn't it only they don't give you support?
They have aid stations. No, you just don't have the course isn't marked, so you have to download the course beforehand and then have it on a GPS. Or If you're old fashioned, bring a map. If you're a hipster, but like the point is like
the have a map open on my bars the whole time.
Yeah. The point is it's not marked, but there are aid stations and they're pretty well stocked too. But those aid stations allow for people to come provide aid, like specific aid for a rider.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
I don't ever want to do Dirty Kanza.
You guys want to come support me at
I'll
Kanza?
support you. Heck yeah, man.
12 Chad's like, nah. So you could just be at my Rick at every aid station, just cheer me on with some alcohol.
That's it. Let's go into Kevin's question. He says, first off, I've officially given the obligatory 5 stars for your app and podcast. Thanks for doing that.
Thanks, Kevin.
We're rising up still, but it's a slim lead. Everybody continue. If you feel like we earn 5 stars, we'd appreciate you leaving that on iTunes. Very much
Lance
so.
Armstrong's tenacious. He's not a quitter.
No, he's not a quitter. We know that. He says, I've been a long-time user of TrainerRoad and have enjoyed using the training plans and watching my fitness increase. I have somewhat of an odd workout schedule as an air medical helicopter pilot. I know some people are thinking that this doesn't apply to them, but I really do think that we can extract some applicable principles from this. Yes. He says, I work 7 days of 12-hour shifts from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Then I have 7 days off. I then work 7 nights from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., followed by another 7 days off. And then I start that cycle over again.
Murder on your circadian rhythm.
Man, it's got to be rough, right? And talk about a stressful and emotionally taxing job, too. Yeah. Like, when I was reading this question, I was just thinking about like how my life would change if every day when I had to work, I was in those sort of experiences. Like, oh gosh, that'd be really tough. So thank you, Kevin, for doing what you do, first of all. And hopefully we can give you some helpful advice. He says, however, somewhat like a firefighter, I usually have time to ride the trainer at work when I'm on the day shift and then usually get some sleep most nights when on the night shift. My question relates to the recovery week of the training plan. I usually try and line up the recovery week so they're the same week that I work the night shifts with the thought that whatever sleep I didn't get at work, I get at home during the day, and if I miss my scheduled ride or workout for the day, it wouldn't be that detrimental to the plan because they are just recovery rides like Bald Knob or Pettit, something like that. However, the past few ramp tests have shown that my FTP progression has plateaued. Do you think that this could be because I haven't taken the recovery weeks seriously enough? How beneficial would it be to strictly follow the scheduled recovery week workouts, even if that means getting slightly less average sleep for the week? Or could it be that the night shift throws off my circadian rhythm and my body isn't fully recovered when I do the FTP test? Should I move my recovery week to any of my other options for better results, i.e. day shift or week off? And then he says, I understand that my situation isn't necessarily applicable to many of the TrainerRoad users, but any information on the recovery week would be helpful. I'm also okay if your answer is just a HTFU. For reference points, he's 35 years old, 135 pounds, 5 foot 10 inches, skinny person, 235 watt FTP, 3.84 power to weight ratio. Thanks for your help and fantastic product. So a lot of questions there. I guess that the main thing, I feel like the rest week is kind of like his main point here.
Yeah, so I take
away where it sits.
Where everyone can actually benefit
from
our recommendations. First off, when your FTP plateaus, it doesn't necessarily mean your training's off or your recovery's off. Could just be that's all how you're going to push it right now. So assuming that isn't the case and that you do have room for more FTP improvement, recovery is absolutely something to look at, and you're beset with a whole host of challenges, I should say, in that it just shifts around so much. Sometimes you're sleeping at night, sometimes you're sleeping in the day, sometimes you're completely uninterrupted. So obviously a bit of trial and error is in order, but maximizing your recovery, I think, is one thing you should try first. One thing anybody should try first when they feel like they're a bit overreached or they've hit some form of plateau. Yeah,
we should dig into, I guess, kind of what happens to your body during a rest
week.
Yep.
So let's just talk rest week objectives, what you're after. And I broke them down into really five different subsets. First is hormonal. So over the course of training, cortisol levels are up frequently. Inflammation is up a lot, and testosterone levels just go down, 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 down. And we can kind of counteract that a bit with recovery days inserted in easy rides, but it still doesn't restore them to where we'd all ideally like them to be. So that's one of the objectives, to drop those cortisol levels, to reduce some of the overall body inflammation and specific inflammation, and then to bring testosterone levels back up.
Okay, got it.
This
Makes
applies
sense
to women as well. On the muscular side of things, your muscle contractile properties, so how well your muscle functions, basically. kind of tanks over the course of training. And then we try to lift it back up, restore it, put it back to where we started or close to over the course of recovery days, and then certainly recovery weeks. Also, glycogen stores may not ever really reset to those levels that we came into the training with. So, you may think we're putting it all back in there and we're starting anew each time, but maybe it's 3% lower than it was the prior week, or 5% or whatever. But this is an opportunity to fully replenish those, ideally without overdoing it and adding excess weight to the body. But during recovery week, if you've really hit it hard during your loading cycle, you could probably use some extra caloric intake. On the blood side of things, it allows restoration of your red blood cell volume, and in particular, I'm talking about size, not just the number of red blood cells, but the size of the RBCs themselves. You can reestablish your hemoglobin content, so the oxygen carrying protein in the blood, and then lift your hematocrit. So how many red blood cells there are in relative to your blood plasma. So red blood cell content. And then from the immune system perspective, same thing with the white blood cells. It allows a chance for them to re-regulate or regulate. Over the course of training, we beat the heck out of our immune systems. Yep. I mean, that's just how it is. Yep. It's an insult to our health. We're disrupting homeostasis and hoping the body self-corrects. Yep. And it's really hard to self-correct when we keep on dosing it with training stimuli.
That's why we need that rest week.
Exactly. That's why you need rest days, rest weeks, and rest periods at the end of a season or between seasons. And then dietarily, I just see this as an opportunity to potentially return to a better diet, because we eat a lot of things when we're under a heavy training load that maybe we wouldn't eat otherwise. Quick foods, quick sugars, manufactured foods, stuff like that. So if you're one of those athletes, this could be a good time to ditch all that stuff for a while, get back to whole foods, and just focus on a really basic, nutritious diet. And for what it's worth, I should mention, these are all the same goals as a taper. So when you're tapering, you're trying to do all these same things. You're doing it in preparation for a particular event.
I just had a recovery week, and I think I was doing Baxter, in the middle of it, I didn't feel strong. I felt weak. Normally during the regular work, I pushed through it, but I decided to just pull the plug and quit. Was that a good decision?
I think it's a great decision. I think more people need to get in touch with some days just abandon altogether. I mean, if you're so tired that doing an easy workout seems difficult, you're probably not going to get anything out of that. All you're going to do is impact the recovery timeline negatively. So skip it. Take a day off. And if you haven't done it before, at least do it one time and see, because you may come back that next day just raring to go, feeling really good. Yeah, it happens a lot, and it's because you just bypass one single workout.
Along those lines, his question of how beneficial would it be to strictly follow the scheduled recovery week workouts, even if that means getting slightly less average sleep for the week? I think that's missing the point.
I would definitely prioritize sleep over it, and all these are malleable, especially recovery weeks. I mean, let us handle the loading for you and escalate the TSS and your ramp rates and watch all that closely. But when it comes to the recovery week, if that schedule seems like too much work, or you're partway into it and you're still feeling pretty flat, you're not feeling better over the course of the week, it's probably too much work. Yeah. It may be 60% or 50% or whatever I specifically aimed for, but that may still be too much for you. Maybe you need a 35% or a 40% load over that recovery week, or just less days. Yeah,
in your situation, at least in this case, Kevin, I'd be looking at how to time that recovery week so that I can maximize my ability to recover, right? And instead of timing the recovery week so that maybe it's, during night shifts or anything else like that.
That's another really good point.
Consider timing it so that it's in the spot where you have the most time, even though, and this is tricky, right? This is when you have your week off, your 7 days off or something like that. So then that's when you really want to train hard. But recovering in this case, if you really put all your eggs in that basket, I feel like your training thereafter, even though it may be limited because of work and everything else, it may be higher quality. Maybe you're going to get more benefit because you just really put more focus on the proper recovery behind it. It's definitely something to play with, though, because I bet you'll find something, over time, you'll find what works specifically for you.
And I don't know what his training load is. This might be something that, at the end of that third week when he's heading into a recovery week, he doesn't have a ton of stress, but he needs 2 or 3 really easy days, or maybe just days off, and then he can resume training. Might not even need the full week. You might just find all you're doing is teasing yourself with recovery. You're following that recovery week structure so rigidly that even though you're still tired, you're getting on the bike because that's what the plan says, and then you're never really getting to a point of recovery such that when you start again, of course you're plateaued. You're not going to continue to lift FTP if all you are is tired.
I feel like for FTP plateaus, volume will always increase power to weight, but everyone will always, or increase FTP, but everyone will always hit a spot where their lifestyle, genetics, and diet do not support the amount of training. So you
have a ceiling imposed upon you because of these things.
So that's like the pros, they might be able to do 20, 25 hours a week. I guarantee you I guarantee you, but actually, yes. If you could recover from 40 hours a week of cycling as a pro, you'd probably be better than all the other pros out there. But you can't.
There's a ceiling.
There's ceilings, exactly. So that's why pros focus so much on recovery, so that therefore they can train more too.
I mean, talking to plenty of pro cyclists, that they consider their training time. It's not just like, I know that an average person puts in a 40-hour work week, right? Average. And a pro cyclist isn't going to probably be putting in 40 hours of training on the bike, but they're making up all that deficit plus more on really making sure that they're recovering properly. It's not like the recovery and the work compose their work week, so to speak.
So for Kevin, with his lifestyle, maybe at his 3.84 watts per kilo, that's his ceiling right now with his lifestyle and his sleeping schedule and a stressful job.
Because the only way you're going to lift that is to train more or train harder, two things that might not be on the table.
And those necessitate more recovery and higher
quality
recovery.
And so, and going back to the first thing we talked about, for me, I'm trying to eat more of the fruits, vegetables, and whole grains so that I can train more. And then the other side of that, I have a low immune system on top of all the training. And I look back at blood tests, everyone. In 2012, when I didn't train for at least 11 months, I still had a low immune system. So it's not
overtraining.
Exactly. I think it actually was longer than that, because I think it was like a year and a half where I didn't train in there, and I had a low immune system and a low white blood cell count. But so I'm on top of that, having a low immune system, I'm also training at the same time. So if I could fix that, I feel like
it would help.
Yeah, but so that's another thought of people is, what is your limiter? Is it sleep? Is it stress? Is it nutrition?
Schedule.
Schedule.
Yeah.
Then try to improve whatever that limiter is to your best extent.
Exactly.
So Kevin can't probably say, I'm not doing nights anymore, and keep his job.
Sorry, guys, I'm in the middle of a workout. You can't do that one.
I got to hit 4.5 watts per kilo. You don't understand.
You can't do that.
It's important.
Hopefully that gives you some advice, Kevin, and gives other folks listening to this some insight into the benefits of the recovery weeks that you have. Let's go into the last one. This is one that we actually have been meaning to cover, but we haven't had time for the past couple weeks. We're going to keep the name anonymous, even though it wasn't submitted. So we're just going to do that. It helps everybody play nice. Question is, hey guys, love the podcast and programs. 5 stars across the board. Thanks everybody. Once again, you can keep it up. That would be very much appreciated. My question is not about making myself faster, but what to do about someone else I race with making racing choices I disagree with to make them faster. A fellow racer revealed to me that he had been seeing a doctor and was prescribed testosterone. I assumed this was because his testosterone levels were low, but he said that he was at the very top of the healthy male range, yet he was still taking a healthy dose of testosterone. We are both in our 40s and race Cat 3 in Canada. Although our provincial racing association claims to follow UCI rules and regulations, there is zero chance he will ever be tested, says you. You never know. After this, the knocks are coming at the door, even though it's anonymous. He says, I know this is just amateur racing, and I shouldn't really care. But I work really hard each winter to do my best come race season, and I'm quite sure he is not the only racer taking these measures to be faster. I'm not looking for direct advice regarding what I should do. Just thought it would be interesting to get your opinion overall on the topic. Thanks, from Anonymous. So I guess the first thing we should do before we get into pointing fingers and everything else is probably talk about testosterone. You mentioned it just now when we talked about recovery, but maybe a little bit more specifics on its role.
Yeah, just like a light dose of science on the matter, and science as I understand it. So it's testosterone's role in performance and recovery. First off, it's important to recognize that there are natural ways to influence it. Just because your T's low doesn't mean you have to go to the doctor and start supplementing it. Strength training is very good for it. Heavier the better. Compound lifts. A lot of muscle mass being recruited. Stronger testosterone reaction. High intensity interval training applies as well. So
anywhere we could get that?
Let me think on that.
TrainerRoad.com. I'll drop it. There we go.
Ingestion of quality fats. So cholesterol is the building blocks for all of the sex hormones. So if you're on a low-fat diet, well, maybe consider improving the quality and quantity of your fat intake. Tons of vegetables. Vegetables are just, it's hard to find anything that's ever talks negatively about higher vegetable intake. I just don't see it ever. And lower your body fat. That's excess body fat actually causes testosterone to convert to estrogen. So it's kind of the double whammy there. And then, of course, lower your stress and try to keep your cortisol levels down. So whether that stress is obviously training stress, we're going to go different routes, but just how you deal with stress, the forms of stress that you encounter on a daily basis. If you can tweak any of those things, well, it's in your best interest to do so, especially when we're talking about improving your testosterone levels.
So what does it do for you in actual performance respect?
A lot, especially with the aging athlete whose testosterone levels are declining as the years roll on. It increases protein synthesis and decreases protein breakdown. So it's positive protein turnover. It's easier to add mass, functional muscle mass. Increases the release of growth hormone, which as we age just tanks. I mean, we're not teenage, preteen boys anymore. It increases the number of satellite cells. So the little guys that cling to the outside of the cells that are at the ready for when the cell's damaged, and they swoop in and make repairs, make you stronger, help you super compensate. More of those. And then EPO secretion. So which basically increases your red blood cell count. So more red blood cells, more oxygen delivery, more exercise capacity.
I have to say something on this about it being about performance enhancement. Yeah. There is a famous person in triathlon named Kevin Moats who's been caught twice for doping. He's I think in his and he was doing the whole I'm an aging athlete, my testosterone's low.
Yeah.
And he was arguing, he goes, testosterone is not a performance enhancing drug because if you line up on race day, you're at the line and someone injects you with it, it doesn't immediately make you faster. But what it does...
That's not the definition of performance enhancing.
Exactly. Well, this is what his argument is, okay? What it does is it goes back to what we were just talking about. It increases recovery.
Totally.
So if you have synthetic testosterone or regular testosterone, you come back stronger each and every day. And you can train more each and every day. You're not as tired. So I just want to... that's been bugging me for like 8 years because I heard him say it on another podcast the first time he got caught.
Yeah.
And I was yelling.
It's like saying EPO is not testosterone or performance.
No, that is because because it doesn't. In the moment, you're right. It'd be like only a blood bag where you immediately get it.
Yeah. Caffeine,
exactly.
Like, insane amounts, something like that. Amphetamines.
Exactly. It is. I don't agree with the argument. I'm saying this is what this person's argument was, and yeah.
What about the long-term effects?
Yeah, other than less protein degradation, so less muscle breakdown, there's just no long-term studies. I mean, I've seen a couple crop up that I think looked at 1 year worth of testosterone supplementation. It didn't have any impact on vascular function.
Yeah,
they're worried about stroke and heart attack.
Yeah.
So right now, there's a lot of people doing this with the care of a doctor, and that they can go through. And hopefully getting blood tests a lot.
But what are the longest term studies?
Well, that's what I'm saying is I'm not sure, but I'm hoping by the time I'm 60, 70, 80, that there's enough people that have done it where we can look at 40 years of this.
Yeah.
And because if I'm 80 and a doctor says you can take these drugs, and I'm not racing, and we know for science that it's not going to cause a stroke or heart attack, and it's going to improve your life.
Of your life.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so that's the...
But that's distinctly not what we're talking about.
That's not what we're talking about. Exactly. At all.
Exactly right. I think that this is where, so once again, there's improving the quality of life. We have that in a box over here. And then there's the side when you're a racer and you have an agreement where you have, said that you will not take banned substances.
Yep.
And when you sign up for any sort of racing organization that has those rules in place, you have to abide by those. In competition and out of competition, those rules vary. We've gone over this before in previous podcast episodes. It's very complex, and it's something that you need to, it's the individual's responsibility to take up with the governing body to make sure that they are doing everything correctly. It changes for professionals and non-professionals, plenty of different things. So it's a bit of weeds to go through there.
So the first thing,
I
want to say, because we're going to say, what would you do with this person? So we're going to do a hypothetical.
Yeah.
The first thing I would do is talk to them and make sure they're aware that what they're doing is cheating. Because this person obviously, I don't know if they're aware that they're cheating, but they obviously...
I feel like
they know that
they
it's
freely
low.
share the information. It's a little strange.
It's right. It's like, I just killed someone last week. It was like, but so for instance, some people not know that TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, is not allowed in racing. People might not know too that prednisone, you can't take that while you're in a race. So if you're an age grouper, I believe you can take it outside of competition, but I think pros can't take it at all.
I think that's correct.
Yeah, and the website...
We may be wrong.
We can put this... The website to check is Global Dro.
Global Dro, DRO.
Yeah, and that one you can even email somebody and they'll tell you... They'll give you the very specifics.
Yes.
But that's the first one, is just tell them, because, for instance, if one of you took prednisone on a race and you didn't know you were sick and you did it, I wouldn't be like, I'll call up water right away, be like, bust this guy.
Yeah.
I would say, hey, did you know that was it? And then if you won something, like a national championship, I would hope that you would then remove yourself from the...
Yeah.
The national championship would be a little bit different, but if it's in our local Tuesday night race, I would...
So assuming they know.
And they go, I know this is cheating, or...
Then at that point, what would you do? Because that's complex. So this hits close to home for all of us, because we've actually had a Masters racer who was caught for out of competition.
Yep.
Guys,
doping.
we've all raced. I've raced quite a lot.
Yeah. So in this case, I think that it's something it's important. Like, here's the deal. This is Masters racing. You may be going for a national championship, and I know how that means a lot. And so I'm torn on this, like, because my goal is a national championship in a couple of years. If I found out that somebody was taking banned substances and then beat me, I'd be upset. But at the same time, there's part of me that feels like, you know what, in the end, this whole thing doesn't really matter. Yeah. But then again, I've put in so much time into it. I feel like it's a responsible
maybe it doesn't matter
thing
in
to
the end.
report
It does in the moment, though. I mean, it's a real hard pill to
Here's-
swallow.
Here's what I would do. I would say, if you told me you did that, and I said, you know, that's cheating, like, yes, I know. I'm going to say, I'm going to turn you in unless you stop this. Because just like if someone had a motor in their bike during the race, what would you do?
That's a funny one, right? Because people be much more quick to report the fact that somebody's motor doping.
If someone has an e-bike,
yep.
Would you tell someone that they have an e-bike?
Yeah, they would point it out first thing.
First thing, right?
Yeah.
And if somebody, I'd be like, hey, do you know e-bikes aren't allowed? They're like, I know. I'm just using it.
Yeah.
But there's another way too, where there's some people we race with who I have a pretty good inclination that they're doing steroids. And they high amounts of steroids too don't really give the best cycling performance.
No.
And maybe they're always finishing. They always get dropped or something. I don't know for sure though, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to.
We don't know for sure. They're not affecting the outcome of the race in any.
Yeah, that's the big thing is if someone's a Cat 5 person on TRT and
they're finishing in the back of the pack.
Yeah. Do you still do it?
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
What do you think, Chad?
It sounds like we legitimately need it if that's the case. Cat 5 finishing in the back of the pack and you're on testosterone therapy. Yeah, go ahead. Double up.
You do you, bud.
It's very clear, like someone's going for national championship and you hear this thing, then it's very clear.
Yeah. Here's why I hesitate, right? Is because, like, in the end, does it all matter? You know, in the end, like, even like a non-pro, money isn't on the line or anything else, like, let's just say, and they win a national championship, this person may have, psychologically speaking, if they have some, and granted, they're making the choice, right? They're choosing to dope and everything else. But even if, like, a B sample came back and it was a bad adverse analytical finding, you are guilty. From then on, you are presumed guilty by people. Like, you're branded as a doper. Like, that's it. Like, you can even look, like, right now with, like, Richie Rude and Jared Graves and all of them, those two riders. In the enduro world, it was big news because they're the first riders to have an adverse analytical finding, right? So it was by a French anti-doping authority, and there's a whole lot of weeds around this because they don't know. There was no UCI sanctioning.
A sample and B sample, one of the two. The
interesting thing is the A sample came back as adverse, and they didn't even request a B sample, the riders.
Huh.
So they had two drugs that were very possibly taken in as tainted supplements or something like that ended up getting into their system. In my personal opinion, I don't believe that they were, like, going all ham and trying to dope with this stuff because I don't know. I just think that if you're going to dope, you might as well do it right. And this doesn't seem like a great way to do it. But in this case, Jared Graves is going through cancer right now, right? So he's going through cancer, and it's interesting to see cancer treatment, chemotherapy. It's interesting to see the response. I don't know if it's mountain bike culture or if it's the fact that one of these people is, like, fighting for their life. But when a roadie gets popped for doping, it's just like pitchforks and torches, and people are very upset, it seems like.
Not always. It didn't used to be that way.
True.
Mr. Armstrong.
That's true.
Yeah.
No one wanted to believe it, right? Yep. But in this case, it seems like there's a lot of humanity behind it. And I think about this. If some guy gets caught for doping and he, sure, he wins a national championship or something else, but he gets popped and his life is entirely ruined thereafter. There are choices that he made to ruin his life. Don't get me wrong. I get that. But at the same time, I sit back and think about it, and you know what? I might be okay with whatever is going on there as long as that person is, doesn't find themselves in a hole of depression they can't pull themselves out of. There's a human effect, is what I'm getting.
Yeah, there is a human effect.
Like these people are humans.
I want to know.
Go
To
ahead.
cheat. I have no sympathy for it.
Yeah.
I just have no sympathy for it. I can't muster it. I can't rationalize it. I can't figure out any way to forgive it. You knew it was cheating and you did it anyway.
Yeah.
That's it.
I
End
feel
of
like
conversation. I don't know what I would do in terms of trying to. Honestly, I'd probably remove myself from the situation. I'd probably stop racing.
Yeah.
I feel like it's so tough. I feel like it's my responsibility for everybody else to do it.
It should be. It's our responsibility as racers to uphold the rules, right?
Yeah. The other
Do something else.
Yeah.
The other.
Yeah.
So let's say triathlon, where it's like not a team sport. Let's say somebody does a Ironman and they finish in 16 hours, right? And they're in the male 30 to 34 age group, and so they're nowhere competitive. They're very, very back, and they do TRT. Do you call WADA to go test them? I want to know what people say in the forum on that.
Yeah, this is really where it comes to.
Don't tell me, people, because just don't tell me.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see people's perspectives
Right?
on this.
Yeah.
Because I really
Don't ask, don't tell.
People leave their no. I mean, not that. Just don't do.
At that level,
See, that's the tough part. You do a gravel race and you finish second to last, but you've done TRT and it's made you go from 400 pounds to 200 pounds.
I mean, if it's not sanctioned, it's fine.
Not
is
sanctioned. Yeah,
then there's a problem.
that's another good point. Is the not sanctioned races? Is it illegal to dope? I think ethically it's against the rules, but not against the.
There's no written rule against it, unless, for example, you have something like although I think Breck Epic is UCI sanctioned now, but they've always not allowed dopers. I don't think they had any sanctioning, but they wrote just basically no doping. Right?
Yeah, no doping. I'm guessing that Epic Rides has that too. For the pros, hey, you can't dope on this.
I believe so.
Yeah.
And I know that a number of the riders there want to have anti-doping at the Epic Rides races. Clean racers want that.
That's another thing that gets me, especially in CrossFit. Testing at the race venue doesn't do a whole lot. Because you could take testosterone
catches the low-hanging fruit.
It's got to be random at a competition, just pop by. Let's see how.
It's only the dumb people get caught.
Yeah,
And I don't want to. This is all read any of the books and stuff. I'm not teaching people how to dope.
You go to a national competition and fare well, and you're still glowing. You're an idiot.
Yes.
But I mean, you can do testosterone for. Oh, even see people. They leave they drop their license for a year.
Yep.
You don't get tested during that year.
Yep.
You could do a whole year of a whole bunch of drugs, get fit, and then come back in, don't dope for however long it takes to get out of your system, and then dope again. And
you have benefit that lasts.
And then the lifetime residual effects too that we've actually read about.
Yep.
I mean, there are benefits that they incur during the doping process that carry for decades.
Exactly. So you see some of these people that got caught, let's say in 2000s, and now they're winning big races. It's very frustrating.
They're clean, but they're still benefiting from when they were dirty.
I
know.
I know.
Yeah, it's frustrating, man. It's tricky. Let us know what you would do.
This is where I think it should happen in triathlon and in gravel racing stuff. There should be I'm in
an open class,
and let's say I'm a TRT. I'm in this league or this division, and all the TRT people can race each other. Nobody qualifies for Kona. You don't get podiums or anything like that, but you can participate, and then I can feel good as a.
The problem is that won't happen, and the reason that won't happen.
I think it could happen one day.
No, because those people, if they win that division, it doesn't matter. It's not very important to them.
Well,
because it's the fact is,
it's
not credited and it's not held in the same respect.
It's the matter on the motivation, because there's the people who are doing the 15-hour Ironman who go from 400 pounds to 200 pounds.
Totally.
Those people don't care at all.
Yeah.
But the people that want to have a high podium finish, you're right. They're not going to go in the other one. They're trying to actually win by cheating.
Like sufficient motivation to cheat, right? They want to win a prestigious race.
But I mean, I would still. I like the idea of for triathlon, people that are older. They're not doing anything. I mean, they're doing stuff, but they want to accomplish something. Yeah. And physically, they probably couldn't accomplish it without this sort of stuff.
I like that too. I just don't think it'll ever happen. You know? It's unfortunate.
It's tough.
This is a tricky one. It's one that all of us deal with on some level. Maybe you don't even know that you deal with it, and somebody else, close to you is doing that sort of thing. We'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it. Really, because hopefully I tend to be the touchy-feely side of things, and I really the one thing that's been really illuminating, at least by seeing how these enduro racers have these adverse analytical findings, and they got popped. It was refreshing to see people not just like coming at them with pitchforks.
Yeah. Here's another analogy before we end.
Yeah.
Before weed was illegal in Nevada.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I see people smoke weed. I'm like, that's not hurting anybody, so I'm not going to call the cops right now on you.
Yeah.
I almost feel like that 15-hour Ironman person or that last place gravel racer. Yeah. You're not hurting anyone.
Right.
But then maybe someone who's robbing people, that's different.
Yeah, it's all a question of where you draw the line.
I know. I struggle with this. Luckily, no one ever comes up to me and goes, "Hey, Nate, I take
line's clearly drawn.
EPO every day."
The line's clearly drawn, right?
It is clearly drawn. But it is for. I mean, have you guys ever seen someone smoke weed and call the cops on them?
Yeah.
Right.
Welcome. Welcome to it.
Is there a difference?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. It's hard.
So let us know what you think. Forum.trainerroad.com. Please submit the questions. I continue to do so at trainerroad.com/podcast. Chad and I, just as a heads up for the upcoming next weeks, Chad and I, we're going to have a podcast next week, like the normal schedule.
Normal time.
But then thereafter, Chad and I will not be here for the following week because we will be at Powder Creek Lodge up in the high Canadian Rockies having an awesome week of backcountry skiing.
Base training.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So, Nate, we'll miss you. Are you just going to podcast by yourself?
Sure, I can. Pete and I will do it.
Yeah, we'll put something in place so that you guys will have an episode to listen to that week. It may not be live, but we'll have something in place for you guys there. And we'll be able to carry on. So you'll have a podcast just the same. Chad and I will be in it. It'll just be recorded earlier. We'll see. So stay tuned for that. If you're with us on the live stream, stay tuned, and we'll answer some of the questions you've submitted. Talk to you all next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Chad, what do you think about intermittent fasting for weight loss?
Every time I think I have a solid take on the matter, someone reputable or trustworthy, in the last case was Stacy Sims, kind of poo-pooed it, and I have to agree with a lot of what she said. Basically, her gist, and it's different for women than it is for men, substantially different. I don't want to butcher that just yet. I'd rather get my notes in order before we talk about that. But she did say we fast every day. I mean, if you have a dinner around 6 o'clock and you don't get up and eat breakfast till the next morning at 6 or 7, there's a 12-hour fast. I mean, extending that fast, I mean, it can have a definitive impact on weight gain, but it's typically because people eat less because they're skipping that meal and they're not compensating in the whatever their eating window is, rather than they're eating the same caloric intake just in a shorter time frame. It's like I said, every time I think I have a grasp on it, I see something that says, nah, it's just not an effective way to manage weight.
A lot of times when you do fast for longer periods than that, you physically can't eat enough calories during the small window to replace it.
It's too hard.
I could,
so
but
the
most people couldn't.
The arguments that say that it doesn't really accomplish weight loss in any manner other than caloric restriction are pretty strong.
Believe it or not,
I have a hard time with it.
Intermittent fasting makes you eat less. like that's like the thing about it that a lot of people just don't realize is the fact that you're just not eating as much.
That's what it is in most cases. Most short-term fixes are simply a matter of the fact that you're eating less calories than you used to, and you're losing weight.
Yeah, exactly. And most people are probably eating too much, so therefore they're eating less and they lose weight.
There are strong advocates, and some of them pose really strong arguments. So I can't say for sure. And every time I dip my toe into those waters, I just
I'm an intermittent faster on Thursdays. I don't eat before the podcast, so this is always fasted.
I do sometimes. You know what? I was doing that before. But then I found my Thursday rides weren't as good.
It throws it off.
Yeah.
It's not intentional. Yeah. It's just that with my schedule and everything else, with getting Simon going, I just don't have time to eat usually on Thursdays.
Biggest concern is cortisol levels. We just talked about it, and they have a tremendous impact on a lot of aspects, not just training, a lot of aspects of day-to-day living. And for that reason alone, I mean, I find that when I get up in the morning and if I try to fast through till noon, which I used to do pretty regularly, I had this low-level anxiety up until I ate. And then when I ate, gone. And same thing. In the morning I get up, I get out of bed. I'm an early riser, like 4:30. If I don't eat by 5:30, I am markedly more anxious. But as soon as I have that, and it can't be anything, it's typically a protein source, I feel great. I think more coherently. I just feel better. Anxiety dips.
Yeah.
So for that reason alone, I'm kind of done with it.
What I see Dr. Fung say too is there's two different arguments here. Dr. Fung saying that like telling people to eat less people just don't do it. That doesn't mean that eating less won't make you lose weight.
Right.
So what he's advocating is intermittent fasting is an easier way to make people
Eat less.
Eat less.
Yep.
Exactly. And he said just because you just tell someone to eat less calories, it doesn't happen. They do it for a little bit, and then they stop doing it. And there's lots of research that shows that the average person doesn't do that. But I would argue, too, the average person does not do any of this stuff that we're doing for riding bikes and all that
That's
sort
another
of
argument,
stuff.
too. So intermittent fasting with an endurance training lifestyle, that's a tough match or a tough mix.
We're in like the top 1% of people in the world.
Yeah, so when you see average studies and data and everything else, the constraints that we have in our lives are nowhere near in line with those.
And all the people too. You're listening to a podcast about cycling, about being faster. You are so much more motivated than the average person.
Totally.
And more educated. Where a lot of people don't know. It sounds weird, but people still don't know that like Doritos aren't good for them.
Yeah, totally.
Right, and that soda isn't good for them.
Yeah, it says Cooler Ranch, and you put ranch on salad, so it must be healthy. Right?
Well,
it's like this is the string of logic.
Is that how they put that together?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mark has a good question for you, Chad. Does VO2 max drop with age? I was tested 10 plus years ago and now close to 50. Should I get retested?
I don't know why you would get retested, but yeah, it does drop. So I think on average it's like 1% per year. Is that right?
I believe so.
I've read the stat. But you can mitigate that with high intensity training, with weight training, with high intensity training. So if you address your declining VO2 max with VO2 max workouts, VO2 stimuli, then less and less.
If it's influencing your training, sure, retest it. Like if you're making
but
changes.
it doesn't.
But that's the thing about it, right?
Yeah, and that's VO2 max information isn't all that useful, especially unless you're a high level athlete, and even then.
It's a thing that you might use to like humble brag or openly brag, but it doesn't.
It kind of tells you what you're working with, and then you can steer your training from there. But routinely retesting it and seeing changes in it,
and even then steering it from there is tough.
It just makes I personally don't find a lot of value in it. It was interesting in the podcast so people know. Yeah, this is why Jonathan's so much faster than me.
Well, it's fun to see what you're working with too. It really is.
Sure.
So if you do it one time, just to get and maybe you do it one time when you're really deconditioned, and then you do it another time where you're highly conditioned. That'd be interesting too.
Yeah,
but again, I don't know that it's going to steer your training all that much.
That's the point. Is it's interesting. The other thing too is. You want to go to like a higher level place to get it tested. I've read all these things where people go to like a gym and they have a lower level cart and they're like, yeah, I was 88. I'm like, no, dude, you would be like winning the tour or whatever sport. You would be the very best. You'd be at 6 watts a kilo.
You'd be the best.
You'd be the best. Yep. Right.
Another question that is decidedly not for me. What effect does beer have on recovery? We've covered this before. We even have a blog post, I believe, on this. Yeah. But Chad, can you give us the quick synopsis?
It kind of steers your macronutrient partitioning, if you will. So alcohol, it becomes the priority. Your body can't store it, so it has to ditch it. So it has to metabolize it. So basically, everything else takes a back seat to it. Typically, it steers you toward worse dietary choices. I don't make the best choices when I got a couple beers in me, as opposed to when I go into a meal sober. It's pretty easy to put down the fork, pretty easy to eat the right things.
Dessert always gets called when you're drinking.
Yeah, pretty much.
Then
every
you got
time.
your bookends.
Every time. Bookends, there it is.
Yeah.
One goes with the other. And then, of course, it hampers. I don't imagine. I'm just guessing here, but I can't imagine it does anything positive for inflammation.
Right.
The calories that go with it are empty, about as empty as they can be, and if they're in the form of something like beer, they're higher they're substantially higher than other forms of alcohol.
But it's so much fun.
It is. I mean, so a single beer after a workout, I have a hard time cautioning people against that. I mean, why not? Just you did the hard work. You want a small reward. Yeah, it may chip into your recovery a bit. It may chip into the caloric deficit you created and the weight loss that could come as a result of the workout, but.
It depends on the person and their goals, right, Chad? So if Jonathan is
for sure, it's
4 months out,
in line with anybody's goals.
If Jonathan's 4 months out of nationals, would you be telling him to skip the beer after each workout?
No, heck no. I mean, yeah. So I mean, you have to prioritize.
Heck yes, right? Like
yeah, he'd be saying yes to skipping it.
Yeah,
it's funny.
Be sensible about it.
But the eating, going back to the eating less,
say that.
The same thing that you said about making bad choices. I found that if I calorie restrict myself, like for lunch, a big salad and a sweet potato, that's probably not enough calories for me. I find that later on, then I can't make those good choices.
Yeah.
And for dinner, then I start having more and more. And if I would just have stuffed myself with extra good food at lunch, then at dinner, it's an easy choice.
Especially because you train in the afternoon, right?
Yep.
So like you don't need to eat a bunch after that workout. You need to eat a bunch beforehand. Or
exactly.
putting it, at least allocating that stuff in that place. This next one, I've been sick for like 3 weeks now. Aside from the physical side, how do you mentally get back into training?
Looking at me.
Psychological side.
This is all you, Nate.
Well, that one was for Chad. This one's for you.
Yeah. So what I always expect is like it's going to take me a month to get back to where I was.
Yeah.
That's how I feel, and that sounds really bad, but oftentimes sometimes I'll do those like tester workouts like Gendarme, which is an easier workout. I'll do a Baxter. After a couple of days, I might do a Mount Deborah, which is a little easier too, or I might do a Sleeping Beauty. Yeah. All of those are easier workouts. Yeah. Mount Deborah is a little bit harder, and then I go back and I don't try to jump back in right where I've been. I mean, I have tried that.
Don't make that
mistake. Doesn't work.
It never works.
It doesn't work for
and
anybody.
then you just get more.
And I do it over and over again.
Yep.
So you just have to accept that you now have gone a lot slower. And I get sick a lot, and my kid will be sick, and you can't ignore your kids when you're sick.
No, you can't.
And I'll be holding my son, and he sneezes from 0 to 60 it's so fast. So he'll just directly sneeze inside of my mouth.
Oh yeah. Oh
yeah.
Like,
man. I just lost a month of training.
Yep. There we go.
Like boom,
Thanks, son.
gone. It's amazing. He doesn't go. He's just like. Choop.
It's
I'm
out.
like, how did that happen?
Little sniper. But
Yeah.
with I like how you said it's going to take a month, and that's super important because if you tell yourself, nah, maybe it'll take a week, you're just setting yourself up for discouragement. And I feel like when you give yourself the necessary time to really get back into it slowly, sure, physically you'll be in a better position, but psychologically it'll help so much. You just don't. If you stress thereafter, you're already going to be stressed. Your body's under a lot of duress after going through and recovering from illness and everything else. There's no need to make it more stressful than it already is.
For instance, having I might build up to sweet spot weekend of right peak, which is 3 by 30 minute sweet spot intervals, which is a great workout. When I feel I can do that, I'm like, I am solid at this FTP. I get sick. I start over at 10 minute sweet spot intervals. Yeah. Yep, and not as many. And that is hard.
The severity of the illness is going to dictate how long that comeback is. But I mean, what are we talking here? 3 weeks, you say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's going to be longer than a month.
Long path back.
Yeah. I've been pretty sick on and off for since I last tested, so like 8 weeks or more than that. And I just did another FTP test. Raised my FTP by 6 watts,
nice.
Which is frustrating because
the point is the direction in which
But I was more fit like 4 weeks ago because that's when I was doing right peak and some of those really harder workouts, and I got sick again, and it kind of went back down, and now I'm trying to get back up. But it's just I think it's being consistent and knowing you're always going to have setbacks. Everyone has setbacks,
and just make it a patient return to where you were at. The longer you're ill, the longer it's going to take to get back there, but you'll get back there.
I also find when I first come back, I always have a higher heart rate than normal. Ignore that.
Yes.
And then I also find that a couple of VO2 max workouts are way easier than jumping right back into sweet spot or threshold.
Shorter, harder stuff.
That's extremely hard.
Yeah, sweet spot can be pretty darn hard. That's like another tip for that one. Like this year prior to getting sick, my heart rate was always just hovering around. If I'm doing like sweet spot style work, anything like that, it was hovering in the low 160s, somewhere around there, mid 160s. Now doing the same thing, and even if I were to drop that, and I had never even saw above 180 this year, even doing hard efforts, and now being coming back from being sick, it's in the 180s. It just hovers in there.
Your heart rate's in the 180s?
Yeah.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, and you can jump back into sweet spot efforts. I mean, it doesn't have to be VO2 max. Doesn't have to be that short and sweet. But even the VO2 max efforts, don't jump back into the long ones. Just like what Nate said. He took 30-minute efforts and he dialed them way back down to 10-minute efforts. Yep. If you had worked up to 10-minute efforts, dial them way back down to 3 or 4-minute efforts.
And a key point that I want to make to draw the heart rate thing back into I guess a connection here. I'm not doing a single thing based off of that.
Yeah.
I can see it, but I'm not letting it affect my training.
The other thing
is your body's still in the throes of something, whether it's rebounding from illness, still dealing with a little residual illness. I mean, it's still under a little extra stress, but it doesn't mean you can't do your workouts effectively.
I'm probably pinging at 160 right now just sitting here. Like the thing is, if I let it affect it, then I wouldn't even train at all. I wouldn't be doing a single thing.
The thing also, someone asked me this on Strava, is when do you know that it's the new normal rather than just a temporary dip in your fitness? For instance, if you were doing 10-minute intervals and then you got sick and you just got a new FTP, like how much farther could you go back before you need to turn it down? You can do 1-minute intervals at sweet spot. No. I struggle with that personally.
Yeah.
And I always err on the side of not lowering my FTP.
Yeah.
I just dial back to the easier workouts, and there are easier workouts in the library, and then build up from there. But I think there is a time when you do those easy workouts, and even those are not doing difficult. Then I would just either retest or just bam, knock it down 20 watts, try to get back to where things are feeling better, and then retest.
2 quick questions. First one's from Claire, and there's an answer provided here in the comments on YouTube, but it's only partially correct. Claire says, how did you come up with the names for the TrainerRoad workouts? Are they named after a ride or a person who developed the workout? The answer was given that they're all local climbs. That's not true. They're mountain peaks.
Mountain peaks all over the world. Mountain peaks, ranges, features.
In some cases, there are climbs that like a famous, like a local. We do have some local climbs.
Mauna Kea. I can't believe I haven't done a Mauna Kea.
Oh yeah.
Make that like disaster times 2.
We've been trying not to do famous climbs because then people will associate them with the actual climb.
Keep doing Alpe d'Huez over and over.
Yeah, they'll think Alpe d'Huez is Alpe d'Huez. But we do Rose. No one knows Rose outside of Reno, so it's okay.
So you'll see a lot of the names, and then if you were to look at a topo map like USGS or anything else like that, and you were to look at features, you would see a lot of TrainerRoad workout names.
Yeah.
Because that's
punch any of them into Google and you'll see what range it's part of, or maybe it's the name of the range.
So it's mountains. The next one, what would you prefer between a 29-pound full suspension bike and a 20-pound hardtail for a 24-hour race? I would take, so there's 2 things here. First of all, I feel like when people compare hardtail and full suspension, they're much too hung up on the weight in most cases. I'm going to throw an asterisk out here for that one, but they're much too hung up on the weight. The more important thing is we're talking about energy preservation, we're talking about longevity and comfort and everything else like that. That's where I feel like a full suspension has an advantage. But when you're talking about a bike that is almost a third heavier, that's a pretty substantial difference. Yeah. But the main thing is, if that 29-pound full suspension bike pedals extremely efficiently, then it might be in the running. But if it doesn't pedal extremely efficiently, a third heavier is a lot. I don't think at that point it's worth it.
I always think of this is just my rule of thumb, 1 pound equals 1 watt. Mm-hmm. That's what I think of on climbs and stuff. So,
and I don't know if that's like a straight across.
It's not. It's not. But when I climb with you, Jonathan, I think you're 40 or 45 pounds lighter than me.
Yeah.
And I look at average power and stuff, and it's always around that 40, 45. So that's my rule of thumb. So your hardtail, could be 9 watts you're losing. But then, like you said, if it's like a trail bike, which is if it's heavier, it could be a trail bike.
Yeah.
And it could be like super bobby.
Yeah.
I'm not sure have they shown how many watts you could lose with a...
They don't.
They could totally do that
they
because
could totally do it.
You put one on the pedals and you put another on the rear wheel, like a power
could
tap.
do that.
And you could figure it... Or on a trainer.
Yeah.
You'd have to get them calibrated pretty well. But yeah, that could figure it out. It'd be tough, though, because outside is a little different than on the trainer.
You'd have to do it outside, really.
And then there's the other advantage, like you said, about that you've said a few times. I don't need to go through it.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's see. Do you have another one, Nate?
Yeah, Alex, happy holidays, guys. Question on peaking. Next year, he'd like to peak for cyclocross Nats in November, which means I would start base training in April. What should I do between now and then to maximize performance? So this is a common question. Let's say you have 4 months before you really start serious on training. Mm-hmm. We've seen before, if you start now, you're most likely going to get burnt out. If you start like really serious training, what should you do between now and April?
I would probably roll through either a base build, maybe even a base build base. I don't know. I might even specialize. I might pick an event. I like the idea of, if it's, 4 months is 24 weeks worth of training. Yeah. If I didn't have something at the end of that 24 weeks to direct my training, to motivate me, it'd be tough for me. So if I was just bouncing from base to build back to base again, I don't know, the motivation would be there for me. So I might pick an event roughly 24 weeks out or 20 weeks out, something that I can work toward and improve that ideally lined up with the demands of, in this case, cyclocross season. So maybe I would work towards being a fast crit rider for the early part of the year, and then table it for a couple of weeks, back off, do an endurance block, maybe take some time off from the bike, and then begin in earnest your cyclocross training.
I like that idea too of you do that big event and then or a series of events, and then you do 2 weeks like almost completely off. Like it's your off season in April, which feels weird. Yeah. And then you start, because cross takes so long.
Oh yeah, and I'll tell you one thing, don't look at that entire span of time as training up until cross season. There has to be some variety in there. There has to be some downtime. So. Yeah.
The final one that I'll cover here is somebody says, for DK, there are not aid stations. They only provide water. That's an aid station. If they provide
Just water, though.
Yeah, but if they provide water, that's an aid station.
And does your support have to be at those aid stations, or can they be anywhere along the course?
I don't know that answer. But I know that they can be at those aid stations.
Gotcha.
So that's still an aid station. So if they didn't have anything, it would be an unsupported race with no aid stations. But yeah, still an aid station. So okay. Yeah, I guess that covers it. Lots of talk about the performance enhancing drug usage. So and somebody in there is mentioning the fact that they had testicular cancer and natural production of testosterone never picked up thereafter, and that's why they use TRT.
Well, can you get a
Totally
TUE for that?
sense. He
Right?
can get a TUE.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and I probably can't get a TUE.
No, and that's
I don't think anybody has a problem with situations like that.
Totally.
no. I think some people. So
Do they?
here's another situation. Yeah,
Oh,
like
boy.
if you have testicular cancer and you can't do it, but let's say you can't get a TUE because the TUEs for testosterone are extremely hard to get.
That's what I've heard.
In that case, I wouldn't care.
I wouldn't.
Like I wouldn't care. Like you have cancer, like especially you lost whatever you lost. Like
Yeah.
that's when I would be like, you go for it. Like
Yeah.
but then what if you win a national champ on that?
That's that shifting line again. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly. It's so tough.
Gosh.
But what if they're a 15-hour person and they had cancer? Right? What do
We
you-
can go theoretical as long as
I
we
know.
want
Well,
on
it's
that one.
it's these they're theoretical, but I swear there's people out there that have these
It's
exact
real.
situations.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's real.
The temptation is to go case by case, but you can't. I mean, it's unrealistic. So there have to be rules. And
And that's why they do it. I know.
it's
But the
tough.
question is,
Super
do you
tough.
turn them in? Because if they got tested, it's just that's the rule.
Yeah.
personally, no.
It's easy. You can blame it on the testing, right?
I
The
know.
testing took care of it for you, but in that case, it doesn't happen all the time. Final clarification: somebody said that for Dirty Kanza, all support has to happen at those designated spots only.
Okay, there it is.
So, cool. Okay, everybody. Thanks so much, and thanks, Anthony, for that last little bit of information that you threw in there. Join us next week, typical time, Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific. We are going to be recording here live, and we'll hope that you'll be joining us. Share the podcast with your friends and have them join us too. We'd appreciate that. And submit the questions at trainerroad.com/podcast. Talk to you all soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye bye.